Welcome to everybody and good morning. Welcome to everybody to this in-public meeting of the Trust Board. We are for it. We have one apology this morning from Jogger, who unfortunately unable to make it today. And we have two members joining us remotely. We have Hannah and we have Hugh. Can we just check, Hannah and Hugh? Can you hear us okay?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent, good. I'll do my best to see hands up during the course of the meeting, but if anybody sees hands up, please do give me a shout. It's a long way from my eyes to that screen, and the little yellow hand is sometimes quite difficult to see. A couple of reminders with just one apology. We are, of course, for it. The meeting is being recorded. People need to be aware of that, of course. And as we know, this is an in-public meeting. And a few words that I said last time, I repeat them again this time for the benefit of anybody joining us externally as a member of the public. Just a reminder that the purpose of this board meeting is not to undertake all of the governance process. Indeed, most of the governance process takes place before the board meeting through all of our committees. And the evidence of that is seen by their minutes and also by the AAA reports, which will be referenced during the course of this meeting. So our purpose today is not to repeat all of that governance, but it is to satisfy ourselves that that governance process has taken place. And we'll do that as the meeting progresses. I think that's all I need to say by way of introduction. The next item is declarations of interest. Just need to confirm if anybody has any declarations of interest to declare. See nobody doing that. Good, thank you very much. Move on to the next item, which is the minutes of the last meeting. It's not my intention to review them in detail, but merely to ask whether there are any comments or corrections anybody wishes to make to those minutes, which were included in the board pack, of course. Doesn't appear so. So are we content to accept that they are of a record? Good. Okay, thank you. So we've approved those. Next, we come to the action log. There was only one item on the action log, which is an item relating to culture. And that was going to come to this meeting, but I understand now that's going to be delayed a little bit longer. Angie, is that right? Is it your item? It's Rachel's.
Yeah, this is, we had a first discussion at the Finance Performance Committee on the measures that we're going to use in terms of our IMTP and strategy progress, and that will go through execs again, come back to the various committees, either virtually or in person, and then back to boards as this says in July for ratification.
Good. Okay, thanks very much. Next item is just the chair's report. I've only got a couple of brief things to mention. The board did hold its usual board development day recently, or a month ago. Those meetings take place in between the board meetings. And just for the record, for those who weren't attending or who are interested, the three topics that we considered there, or three events, we considered the trust charity strategy. We also considered in some detail the Welsh Government structured assessment on this board. And we also had an opportunity to view a number of the new vehicles, which the Net Service is using, which was very interesting and very good. We also took some time also to have a little think about strategy and how we might develop our strategy plans for the next iteration of the annual plan, which will take place in 12 months' time. So that's all from me, unless there's any questions from anybody on that. No? Good. So GPH report, it's over to you, Jason.
Thanks, Chair. And unusually, there's quite a few bits I want to pull out in this morning. This is packed with a load of stuff, and there's a few things I just want a few more things I just want to highlight to the board. So first up, in section 3, the last 2 dot points, if I can. Yesterday, we held our regular 6-monthly leadership symposium. So this is with the top 140 managers nationally across the organisation, and we dedicate that time where we come together with all of our senior leaders increasingly on their development. We had a good day yesterday, externally facilitated, with lots of energy in the room, helping our leaders understand themselves and how they can get the best out of their teams and their people, and there'll be more on that as part of the people plan. We'll hear a bit more about that later on the agenda. And the last dot point in section 3, I just want to draw the board's attention to. I did have the pleasure, and it was a pleasure, I have to say, of representing the entire organisation, all of our people, staff and volunteers, at the coronation of His Majesty King Charles III at Westminster Abbey earlier this month. and it was a great day. Whilst a long day, great to be part of that event alongside colleagues from the other 3 nations across the UK. So there's representation from each of the 4 nations ambulance services, along with chief fire officers and others. But it was good that we were able to represent our people, all of our people there. Moving on, section 4, I just want to call out and say thanks to Chris and his team for yet again turning in a good result at year end. We already know the outturn and the result, but I think I just want to say thank you, Chris, to you and your team for your efforts in stewarding a good result for us at year end. And whilst we've still got some way to go, subject to audit, some way to go with our audit of it, all the indications are that we've got a small surplus at year end again, which is good. Thank you. If you can pass on thanks to the team, because I know the last few months, particularly of the financial year, are difficult for them. 13 draws out that we've found a new station for Dongethli. Hugh, I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear that. I can see you waving and smiling. So we've got a new site identified and work underway now to scope out the works for that site finally, which is good news for colleagues based there. That's been a project that's been on the books for years. So it's good now to finally get that sorted. Sickness absence at 21. Colleagues in P&C will be much more familiar with the detail here, but I do think significant progress, it's fair to say, has been made. In February, we recorded 7.9% overall absence, which, when you think about where we were at peak, pushing 15 and 16%, whilst we've still got a little way to go, there is considerable improvement that's been made, thanks again, to colleagues around the table, but particularly in Angie's team and in Lee's team, where the bulk of obviously that absence has occurred. So it's good to see that we've got that returning to a more normal level and tracking in line with the trajectory that we agreed with commissioners, which is good. 31, Angie will probably talk a bit more about this later, but I do just want to formally draw this out in as much as we've adjusted the name of what was the Workforce Directorate, Workforce and OD Directorate, to People and Culture, to better reflect what Angie and the team are seeking to do and what we're seeking to do as a board, particularly around culture, but also continuing to invest in our people in every opportunity that we have. 38 is on industrial action. Really, this is just perhaps a bit more of a more timely update. We now know that our 3 major trade unions, so Unison, GMB and Unite, have voted on a majority basis to accept the revised pay offer, the revised 2-year pay offer from the Welsh Government. RCN have rejected, as has been reported in the media. And we've got formal notification of 2 dates of action by RCN colleagues next month, so the 6th and 7th of June. The teams will be working with the RCN on derogation approval in the coming days. 50, I just want to draw out, this is the bottom of page 9, draw out International Nurses Day. Liam, you and a contingent of other colleagues went to a service of celebration at Llandaff, I think it was, Cathedral, and there are a number of other events which we supported to recognise the contribution of nurses across our organisation, but across the rest of the NHS too. We'll be doing similar work on International Paramedics Day in July, with supporting a service again at Llandaff, service of commemoration for colleagues. 54, I'm cantering through this, but 54, I was pleased to see again, Liam, that the team working on dementia has been recognised with external validation, with an award externally for the work that we've been doing on dementia, often a difficult area to get into, and one which could easily fall down the priority list, but nonetheless important for patients that we look after and respond to suffering with or living with dementia. So it's really good to see our work being recognised externally. And then 70 is the final point I want to pull out. And Andy, you may want to say something here, but it is very good news, I think, for us as an organisation that one of our own has been voted or appointed, perhaps is a better way to describe it, Andy, as the honorary secretary and vice president at the College of Paramedics. So congratulations to Kerry Robertshaw on that appointment, and not only raising the profile for us as an organisation nationally across the UK within the college, but also an important role developing and progressing the profession. So I don't know, Andy, if you want to add anything briefly there, Chairman.
Yeah. By all means, the AGM was on Tuesday of this week for the college, and that's when Kerry formally took up position as vice president. We've had close links with the college for a significant number of years, but now having Kerry, who's a member of my team, very much at the top table in terms of directing the direction of the college's future aspirations as it aims to become a Royal College, is just fabulous news, and Kerry's an ideal candidate for this, and I'm sure will be a real asset going forward.
So I'll give way there, Chairman, for any questions.
Thank you very much, Jason. So, Bethan, that's it.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any questions, just a few comments to make, really. I think I wanted to acknowledge we spend an awful lot of time at Trust Board and at committee meetings talking about challenges and the difficulties we face, and they certainly continue. But this report, Jason, is just full of positives. You've drawn our attention to several of them, some of the ones that I'd written down. I'm thrilled about the Dementia Award, and I know we're going to hear a little bit more about that work in the patient story shortly. But also the Big Bang recruitment, and I remember Andy talking at one of the committee meetings about this, and he really did show his determination to absolutely achieve as much as we could on this day, making the most of that opportunity. So our ability to make 98 offers of employment, I think, is fabulous, and will stand us in good stead. And also the Gold Award, us achieving the Gold Award on the corporate health standard. There's so many in there. I could say several more, but I won't. I'll stop at that point, Chair. You'll be pleased to hear. But well done, everyone. I just wanted to acknowledge the plethora of great work that's going on.
Okay, thanks, Bethan. I'm sure you'll share that. Kerry.
On a similar theme, actually, I was just going to, I think, congratulate the team, because I think there's a real culture of transformation and innovation. And of course, we spend a lot of time at board talking about challenges, but it's really good to see this, and it's succinct. So I really welcome that. A couple of quick questions. On 36, where we talk about the 111 website, and I think I was aware that there were some accessibility issues around that. And okay, I know it's detailed, but I think it's important that we have sight, and that we are working towards a completely accessible service, particularly because there's so many older people that are using our services. And then my second point, probably for Rachel, I suspect, was on 73, where we talk about engagement on inverting the triangles. And I just wonder if you could just say a little bit more about that. What's the timeline on that? What's that going to entail?
Okay, Leanne, do you want to comment for us on the 111 website?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So the accessibility work, so the Government Digital Services did a review of our website and came back with some recommendations to improve accessibility. So that work has been conducted over the last few weeks. We've actually submitted back to the Government Digital Services for a follow-up review, and they're working through that now to come back with any further comments or recommendations. So we're sort of waiting for a final view of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then Rachel on 73, so this is the PwC work.
Yeah, so this is, we're hoping to conclude that work with PwC in the next week or so. They've been making some revisions on the basis of comments from colleagues around this table and others. And then in terms of once that's ready, there's a couple of things. One is we had an agreement at the last East Committee, actually, to do some more face-to-face meetings as a committee, which was really helpful, and agreed that well, we're hoping that we've agreed that the first face-to-face session that we have, or the next one we have with them, will focus on our strategy work. So that will be a great opportunity to talk to the chief execs across Wales. Jason and I think, are probably also going to do a bit of a pre roadshow kind of with them in terms of going around face to face with them individually to talk through what that is telling us. We'll obviously be bringing it to board development for the board to have a look at, and then, as we know, Estelle has obviously developed a wider kind of engagement plan, which we'll then be working through over the course of the next year, I suppose, in terms of the variety of stakeholders. It's not just chief execs, it's a much wider group of people who we'll be wanting to engage with.
Estelle wants to come in, and then we'll come to you, Paul.
Yeah, it was just to add on that, and thanks for bringing that in, Rachel. So, as you know, we brought the engagement delivery plan to board at the back end of January, I think it was now, and obviously we're working through the PwC work, and then we'll have to slightly reprofile some of that delivery plan, because obviously we've now got the product that we're able to use as the pitch, but the phasing, we'll just relook at that just to make sure we've got that quite right, and the stakeholder groups. But then once we've done the initial things that Rachel has spoken about, we'll sort of fit this work into that plan to move it forward in the way that the board had anticipated, and obviously we'll be reporting back, myself and Rachel and Jason, I'm sure, as we move through that process.
Thanks, Estelle. Paul.
Yeah, I was just wondering, and it's probably to Chris and his team, we talk at board meetings and at committee meetings about the development of the estate. It'd be really helpful, I think, because I don't think we recognise the extent of the improvement that we've made over the last couple of years. So if we had something that looked at where we were, so for example, Blackwheel and Sure, and some of the others, I just wondered if we could do a comparison to see what changes have occurred, because I think probably I've seen more changes in the last 3 years in terms of improvement of our estate than probably the ambulance service has seen in 20 years. So it'd be just useful to demonstrate that, because I think before the meeting, I was talking to a member of staff outside and was talking about how different it is for our people in terms of the working environment, preparation of the vehicles. So it'd be helpful, I think, at one point, whether it's at a board development or in a board meeting, to see a comparison over the last few years to show the development, because we see it piecemeal and we forget the huge number of estate premises we have or rent and the improvement we've made.
Yeah, just quickly, thank you for that, Paul, and absolutely we can do something on that, and would welcome that. I think you're right. I think interestingly, I was only talking to a few of my team in the last week about, as you say, over the recent past, there were some, sort of quite, high level headline sort of sites, if for want of a better phrase, we needed to get out of to move to better premises. HM Stanley in North Wales, Kevin Coyd in Swansea, Blackwheel in Cardiff, and we've kind of achieved those, but alongside that, there's been a lot of work done on some of the smaller sites. We opened the new station in Aberafan last year, and a number of other developments, Bennett Street in Bridgend, and so there's been a lot going on, as you say. And I was really pleased to visit on Monday myself, the next bigger development that we'll have online in the next few months, which is the new fleet workshop in Merthyr. So absolutely, yeah, we'll work with the team to put together, because you're right, there's been, in some ways it's been timing in the way the number of projects have come together and completed over the last sort of 18 months or so. We've also done significant improvements in Vantage Point House in Cumbrae. We've opened Beacon House. There's a lot happened, and as you say, we do see it piecemeal. So I'll get the team to sort of agree a cut-off point and do a compare and contrast sort of before and after. And bring that through. Or development would probably be a place for it, but we'll try and find some time to squeeze that in.
Good. Okay, thanks so much. Any other questions? Anyone I was going to ask, actually, just going back to the recruitment, Andy, the 98 sounds grand. Was that kind of the total you had in mind? Was that more than you were expecting?
I think we set a benchmark up in 70 as being the aim that we're working for. So I think the reality is, as well as that, as time goes on, we'll see some of those drop off. But probably the big headline, the bit I take real assurance from, is the fact that we can attract people from right across the UK that we're seeing Wales as a place to come and work, because we're a progressive organisation, and that's the bit I take most heart from. Yes, the numbers are really useful, but the fact we are being seen as a progressive employer that is bringing a unique offer to the sector that isn't being seen. And I'm only thinking this because some of the discussions I've had the last 2 days at the College of Paramedics conference and wherever, Wales is absolutely on the map across the UK, and some of the work we're doing. It's very, very reassuring.
Just looking around. Any other hands? No, we all okay. Good. Okay. Thanks very much, Jason, and we'll move on. So the next item is questions from the public. I don't believe, Estelle, we have any, do we?
Not at this stage,
No?
Chair, no.
Okay.
So should we get any during the course of the meeting, we'll make sure they're answered in an alternative form.
Perfect. Good. Okay. Thank you very much. So in that case, we now come on to the patient story, and I think Trish has probably just gone to shepherd in our two visitors. Alison Johnson is, I believe, a member of staff, and she's here accompanying a patient, which is Dr. Andy Woodhead, who has been here before on a number of occasions, and he is an Alzheimer's sufferer. He is going to talk to us for a few minutes about the way he's helping the trust, and then it's open to questions, which hopefully we'll have a lively session. Hugh and Hannah, you can still hear us okay? Yes, good, excellent. Good morning. Good morning.
Thanks for having us.
Very, very welcome. Take your seats, and I'll just do a quick introduction, and then we'll hand over to you. So a very, very warm welcome to both of you from the Trust Board. It's a real pleasure to see you here. And Dr. Andy Woodhead, it's a real pleasure to see you again. I haven't met you before, but I gather you've been here to the board.
My
third outing.
Yeah.
You'll be getting a long service award medal before long.
Yeah.
So I think, Alison, do you want to say a few words by way of introduction, and then pass over to your colleague?
Thank you. Yes. Morning, everybody. Thanks so much for the opportunity to come along and chat about some of our dementia highlights over the last number of years. And Andy will as well be saying a few words in a moment about your sort of take on how you support us, how valuable hopefully you think that is, and the sort of relationship that we've had the last number of years and how you see that evolving over time. So I have a few sort of slides to share, just a few picture slides, if that's okay, just to set the scene. So I'll just chat for a few moments, if that's okay, and then pass over to Andy.
Absolutely.
I'm Alison Johnson, and I manage the dementia programme for the Trust. Thanks, Alex. So we have a history of co-production in the dementia team. Really lucky to have had years of experience now of working directly in partnership with people affected by dementia. And when we say people affected by dementia, we mean people living with a condition, their carers, families, all in. So we love that approach. It's, you know, the more the merrier really, and who supports us with our work. Over the last number of years, we have had people affected by dementia involved in delivering training opportunities, webinars, podcasts. We've had people living with dementia involved in job interview processes. That was really good learning experience for the Trust, as well as a range of consultations. And I think presenting stories in forums like this really keeps it at the high level, so that I'm really grateful for that. Thank you. So feedback and engagement with communities over the years drives our dementia programme with regards to what content we focus on, so that's great. And I think the beauty of our co-productive approach with the dementia programme is that we've spent time nurturing those relationships so that they're meaningful, and we have a lot of friends and colleagues that we work with across health, social and third sector, as well as the direct contact that we have with Andy and a range of other people affected by dementia. I could have brought 10 people easily here today, and they're dotted across Wales as well, which is lovely, but Andy won the geography opportunity today because he's close to Cardiff. So just, sorry, can we go backwards? Sorry, Alex, just a little bit on involvement and training here. So as well as delivering direct learning and development opportunities to our workforce, we chair the All Wales Blue Light group in Wales, so we have a lot of contact with police, fire, mounted rescue and other sort of partners like that. So Andy has presented and delivered training to a range of other sort of, you know, professionals over the years. And I'm sure Andy will mention in a moment, but those opportunities allow people affected by the condition to give direct experience have they used our services? What did it feel like? What worked well? What didn't? As well as the sort of role-specific learning that our staff groups require, how to communicate with somebody living with dementia, how to develop relationships, and how to support people if they are confused, agitated, and distressed when they're in our care. So most people will, some of the sort of work here, you have supported and others have supported with some international recognition that we had a couple of years ago, which was wonderful. And we had direct co-production of people living with dementia supporting conferencing and the development of communications and media for that. So that was really nice. So environments, thanks Alex, you just move to the next one. So the last number of years we have focused heavily on our environments, developing optimal dementia and sensory friendly environments. People affected by dementia and other communities and groups of people tell us that being in our environments is stressful, noises, lights, sirens, poor colours, discomfort and things like that is a struggle for people. So we've been doing deep dives into the different sensory experiences that people will struggle with when they're on the vehicle. So lighting, noise audits and things like that. So really unpick some of the issues. So by literature review, a consultation again, and we have developed now some recommendations moving forward to what we want to look at. So I will say that the areas that we're focusing more on is introducing art, therapy, music therapy, and reminiscence therapy into our services. These concepts are hot. They are, across sort of dementia care systems and services. Those therapies are effective, they're evidence-based, they work. So I'm really keen to look at how that'll translate now over to our environments and our services. Other trusts across the world and some in England have done work in this area. What I have found in sort of our literature researches is that that's not shared or celebrated well, and very much so is it not evaluated or audited well and measured with regards to the impact that it has on this patient group. But I'm really keen to sort of build that quality improvement approach and measure and track the activity to make sure we're having positive outcomes. Thank you. Just a few small words on the Rita tablets. We're piloting 20-25 Rita tablets across EMS at the moment. Feedback from, we're 1 year in, so the evaluation will be this summer. Feedback from staff and patients and carers on the use of the tablets, particularly when people are stressed on a long wait. Or having observations and things done if they're struggling with pain and other things that we're doing. Then having access to things like music activities and those sensory reminiscence experiences, the feedback is just amazing and wonderful. So keen to look at, the evaluation will tell us how we want to move forward with that, using that technology, expensive pieces of kit. We need to compare some of that thinking alongside other sort of free or other resources and activities. We're the first ambulance trust in the UK to pilot this. Others are very much hot on our heels. Yorkshire Ambulance Service, Scotland. I was on with Italy this week. That's really exciting. Italy are looking at our progress. They utilised Red Cross out there. So they want to learn from some of our work and how we've done it and what some of the outcomes are. So that'll be a relationship that I'm looking forward to moving forward. Hopefully a visit from Ambulance Victoria from Australia in October. So a colleague out there is really keen to spend a week with us to learn about some of our dementia work. So that's really, really positive. So watch this space with regards to the Rita work. I'll just touch on art therapy a little bit. So some of you may have seen the new NEPS vehicles and how we're using the poppy field blinds. So though on all new vehicles, hopefully now, definitely for NEPS, and I'm really keen to start chatting about EMS and how we can explore some of that there. Those can't be retrofitted though, so there's an opportunity here for us to think about some of the testing and trialing some of the methods. So the next slide just demonstrates window transfers, local imagery. I know this is a bluebell field, I love that. But we're looking at Ceredigion, 2 NEPS vehicles in Ceredigion, 2 pilot local scenery, castles or other sort of areas of natural beauty. So really excited about that. Again, to sort of test that. Thank you. And the largest, just a nod to we have been lucky over the years to be recognised internationally and through some European work, and especially with some UK conferencing. So we've been finalists 3 times for this award, and we've won twice since 2018. So I said to a few this morning, just this keeps us at a UK level really there, and I think others view our approach, particularly the co-production work, and that we're not afraid to just go for it and try and test things, and that we celebrate that, so the work is shared, so partners can actually talk to us and learn and work with us as we move forward. So just delighted with that. So I'm just going to pass to Andy for a few moments to chat about some of your involvement, Andy, if that's okay, and how you feel about that.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say you guys are really blazing the trail, if you like, for not just dementia, but other things. There's a knock-on effect, if you like, for other hidden disabilities which come out of this, which I'm so proud of, which is why I continue to do the work that I do as one of Ali's team. And I was so proud that they got the recognition that they did from the Alzheimer's Society. The Alzheimer's Society had over 400 people that applied, not just for this award, but for the awards in total. But this is one of the prime awards, and it was the only award from the section of awards that was awarded to Wales. I love the blue light strategy. I think it's excellent, and I think it's great that you guys have got this in place. And it's lovely talking to the paramedics, but also, as you know, the 999 strategy. We talk to the other emergency services as well. And now I have lectured in the past in universities in a previous life, so I don't have any problems with public speaking. And one of the benefits of the dementia that I have is that it takes away any inhibitions. So unfortunately, I don't get nervous and I don't have any adrenaline rushes, which is a bit sad because you do need adrenaline. I always tell my son this: you need a little bit of adrenaline to be sharp. But I have now been able to do a half day with Alison for the paramedics course in Swansea University, and that was incredible. I sit on the board at the Heath Hospital for undergraduate and postgraduate studies, so you know, I know what goes on elsewhere, but that's a really good course. It went really well. I lecture students in a lot of other health and care areas, but I got great questions from the paramedics, and usually we don't get, the lecturers always tell me, we don't get any questions when we give a lecture. When someone with lived experience, so I'm not talking personally, comes along to talk, the students are actually quite, once they have got used to you, I think they're not afraid to ask very pertinent questions about how you're affected. And I think one of the ones I remember from the paramedics was, if there was one thing that you think makes the difference and that we can help with, you know, what would that be? What feeling? What issues? And I said to them, as far as I'm concerned, if I had to sum it up with one word, it's feeling safe. And I think from the time that your paramedics, because I've been Unfortunately, a user of the 999 ambulance service on a number of occasions. I've got vascular dementia, so I get TIAs. I've had a major stroke, and they, through their training, they are able to calm me down because, and also my family, because they're useless. They're great carers, you know, but put them in an emergency situation, they really just panic, and that adds to the panic that I feel. So, you know, but as soon as the paramedics come in, that they make me feel confident because they change the whole environment. You know, they take charge, make you feel good, make you feel as if you know what they're doing. They talk to you with respect. Not the family don't, but you know what I mean. They take account of how your feelings are, and they know how to handle agitation, which I think is the most important thing for your paramedics, because unfortunately, people like myself, if we get agitated, these are the two curses really for people with dementia: depression and agitation. And if you get agitated, it's a bit like a spiral. It just gets worse and worse and worse, and they have to break that. And that's what, you know, they're able to do, and that's through interpersonal skills. It's patient-centered care rather than anything that's medical. So, you know, it's really important, you know, that as part of the paramedic training, you know, we're able to do this. And in Wales, we are able to do that. And you know, you with Alison's team have had the recognition, and I was pleased, as I say, just so proud as an Englishman. I was so proud to say that the ambulance service in Wales were really sort of blazing the trail as far as dementia care is concerned. I also, as I say, work with other parts of the NHS, but you know, what you do has had a knock-on effect on so many other hidden disabilities, which I think is brilliant, because you know, people who are autistic, you know, that is difficult. People with mental health issues, you know, it involves all of that. And the Rita thing is amazing, because children in particular, that is useful for lots of other people. So the Rita system is incredible. It's great for people like myself, for the reminiscence therapy, but I don't need to go too far back. I'm still fairly young. When I go to the if I go to a sing along, they'll sing songs that my mother would have sung, you know. So they need to be a bit more trendy, and that Rita iPad is flexible and can do all of that. So it's great for a number of patients, and obviously it's it can be wiped down, so there's no cross infection. A lot of the things that you were using pre the pandemic are now not able to be used because they can't be sanitized, whereas the Padlet can. And I think it's a brilliant initiative, personally. And if I had that, I think with me, you know, that would add to the way in which I would feel, if you like, whilst being transferred and assessed in the ambulance by the paramedics. So I've really, I've had some bad experiences in the A&E environment, but never as far as my ambulance transfers. I think that's the problem. I think I've been treated so well in the ambulance that sometimes it's difficult in an A&E environment to offer the same kind of care, simply because you've got two guys caring for you in the ambulance. Once you get into A&E, you're one of many. So I don't want to detract from A&E, but I think there are some lessons that the rest of the NHS can learn from what you're doing here, and it's great to be able to say that. I raise it as often as I can to give it as much publicity as I can. I've done some media work with and for Alison. Again, I'm media trained, so that it sort of doesn't bother me, and I can still remember a lot of the skills and utilize those. So it's just great to be involved, and I'm congratulations to the board as well, really. It's a major achievement, which I know you support strongly. And can I just say, coming into your reception, your culture, etc., it's amazing. I'm ex human resources, employment law. I did a PhD in European law, not that that's worth anything now. But I think culture in an organisation is important, and what you're doing with dementia care, I think, is a fundamental part of that culture, which has a knock-on effect to the good of the whole service, really.
Thank you, Andy. I mean, it's lovely to have you here. It's lovely to hear your story. I'm sorry that you've had to make use of our blue light service, but it's great that you can report on it, and so we get the benefit of that. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, and Bethany, you're always first, so off you go.
Thank you, Chair. I was a bit too excited to jump in there. Thank you so much for coming, Andy and Alison. The award is amazing, and I know we spoke about that when I arrived this morning, but I wanted to let you know we've discussed it as a board before you joined us as well. It was in the Chief Exec's report to Trust Board. We are all so proud of what you've achieved, and sat here listening to you both speak, I was brimming over with pride, genuinely. I've been involved with WAST for just almost 3.5 years now, and during that time, the level of innovation and creativity I've seen coming from the work that you do here around dementia and mental health is inspiring. And I say that with some knowledge of that, because that's my day job mainly. And it's just so wonderful to see the progress that's being made. 2 questions from me, please. The first one is with regards to the Rita tablet. And Alison, I know you mentioned that the tablets have been in use for almost a year. I know from other discussions they are really well received, and you were certainly advocating for them, Andy, today with Trust Board. There's going to be a pilot, there's going to be an evaluation done now shortly. Will any of that information come through to Quest maybe, so that we can, I'm sure we as a Trust Board and as a Quest committee would want to add any support to continuing that work when the pilot period ends, so that we don't just lose use of it. So that's the first question. And then the second question would be, and again, Andy, you spoke so positively about the support you've received from our colleagues, and that's wonderful to hear. But is there more that we can do? And specifically, is there more that we as a Trust Board can do to help you continue on this journey?
Do you want me to pick up the first question then, and then we can do the second one together? Thank you. Rita evaluation, 100%. So really keen to write that up and then share the learning across the Trust. I'm really keen that we start talking more about some of these new concepts across the service. And yes, we're piloting Rita in the emergency services, soon to launch in NEPs, having conversations with clinical desk, you know, 111 about how we use reminiscence over the phone. There's a massive gap there. We could be doing more. So it's not just emergency services. We're really considering how these dementia concepts are used across the service. So that's really exciting. And again, nobody's doing that in the UK. So yes, in answer to your question, 100% would be really keen to share that and get some of your thinking over where there is a trust, because there is a big financial element to those tablets. Would love your views really on commit or consider how we implement some of that, safely and cost effectively across the service. Question 2, that's a really good question. Yes, maybe we can, I don't know what you think, but I'd love to go away and think about that.
Yeah, I think there's always more that can be done. And that applies, I think, in any situation. I think it would be wrong to say no, everything is perfect. There always is more to do, and as I say, it does require a lot of thought. But I think, because of the co-production, that's really important. I think you're getting the proper feedback that you need to do that, to make things better. I know that Rita, Cardiff Heath Hospital, are picking up the Rita tablet, the board that I sit on. We're talking about introducing that into A&E, which I think is really important. That will help enormously. So there's a lot of cross-fertilization. What is great about the Welsh ambulance service is you're a national service. And to me, that structure makes a real difference. As far as co-production in the NHS is concerned, I'm facilitating with others from Llais Dementia, which is an independent voice for dementia in Wales. I'm sort of trying to co-produce and facilitate the health authorities to talk to one another. There's a bit of a silo thing now at the moment, and do this, because there's the dementia pathway, there's the hospital charter, and all these things have been written in by the Welsh government, and they've got to be achieved. But what I'm trying to get them to do is share best practice, which I think is really important. I don't necessarily know what best practice is, but I know it's going on out there. And the more they talk to one another, because they don't, it's only at meetings that we can coordinate or are trying to coordinate on a regular basis that will make that difference. Yeah.
Thanks, Andy. You've got a number of hands have gone up.
Sorry, Chair, can I
Go
make a quick
You
comment?
can, yes, and then we'll need to.
Yeah, sorry, just very quickly. Ian, am I right in thinking that the amended, updated dementia plan is coming to the next Quest committee? Okay, so that could give us an opportunity after you've had a chance to think through what we could do, perhaps, to have that conversation. Thank you. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Thanks, Beth. And that's a good one. So the hands we've got Paul coming in next, I think, and then we go to Hannah on the screen, Kerry, and also Lee. Not in that order, Lee and then Kerry. But anyway, go to Paul next and then to Hannah.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on one of the things you said, Alison. You said we are lucky to be recognised. That's not true. You've worked for years, and I've been here a lot longer than some of my colleagues around this table, and I know this has taken years in the co-production. So it's not luck, it's actually hard work and co-production. So that's the first thing I wanted to bring up. The second one was a question about volunteers. How much input do you have to volunteers? Now we've got the strategy, because sometimes they will be the first on scene for some patients who may have dementia. And the other thing is, we know that we have early onset dementia that seems to be increasing. So again, I loved your story about, we want to jazz up the reminiscence music. Actually, it's not from the time of your parents, but it's actually probably quite younger now, and increasingly so. So two questions, I suppose, Alison. What about volunteers? And secondly, what are we doing for younger, early onset dementia patients?
Thank you. So yes, with regards to sort of volunteers, I do need to do some work on that. I won't lie. We have been starting to have some recent conversations with the CFR trainers to make sure their skill and knowledge and awareness level of dementia is what it needs to be. So that's moving ahead. But there is other learning we can be doing with those volunteers about some of this new stuff around what activities and resources can you be doing with people affected by dementia to, like we say, reduce agitation, confusion, how to care effectively and communicate effectively, and what resources are at your disposal through work iPads. Potentially, maybe we could be piloting a reader tablet with the CFR. You know, there's lots of work we could be doing there. So that's something I will pick up. But with regards to dementia training, we're on it. But I think there's some other thinking to be doing around some of this newer work that we're doing around reminiscence. Yes, early onset dementia. So with regards to the training we deliver, there's very much content in there around how to recognise early onset, how does it sort of present and what signs and symptoms there are, what support should we be sort of signposting and providing to people and families. And yes, that's a really good point. In all of the resources that we will direct and guide people to, there needs to be appropriate information in there. Now, particularly the reader tablets, there's very much, sort of content from the 60s, 70s, 80s on there, because not everybody will like Lynn and all of that. So there's a lot of, ABBA and other things like that on there.
I love that one. Yeah. Fleetwood Mac would be good.
Yeah, just picking up on one thing, you mentioned early onset there from a sort of how we're delivering our services to patients. We really need to consider our workforce here. That's a massive priority for us. So I'd love to connect with Workforce OD again. I do quite a lot of work with occupational health and wellbeing teams and have delivered training to them, and push information out to our workforce about looking for signs. How, a lot, 1 in 3 now will be living with dementia, as we're aging, but 1 in 8, 1 in 9 of us will be caring for a family member. So there's a lot there that we need to think about. So would love to pick that up with Workforce OD again.
Yeah, thanks, Alison. Shall we, Hannah, I think is next, and then just so we know, we're going to Lee, and then to Kerry, and then to Andy. So quite a few questions coming up. So Hannah, over to you.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you very much, Andy and Alison, for sharing your experiences. I was fortunate to be able to go and see some of the new vehicles last time we were in Cardiff for board development, and so I've seen the poppies, and I spoke to some colleagues about how the various bits and pieces of the new design were coming together. The question that I wanted to ask was just to pick up on something that you said, Andy, a couple of times about the knock-on effect that this is having on other hidden disabilities, and that makes complete sense to me. But I wondered if you could just say a little bit more about that, and also, are you able to share learning in an explicit way with teams working to support people with other hidden disabilities, and sort of how are we really capitalising on this learning to encourage others in other domains to do similar things? Forgive me, that was a slightly waffly question. Does that make sense?
It does to me. And yes, I don't wait to be asked to be given an opportunity to do that. And I'm an advocate, not just for dementia, but mental health and other hidden disabilities, autism. I do a lot of work with suicide prevention, etc. So depression, loneliness is another one that I'm involved in. But in particular, I think your question relates to other hidden disabilities. And I will always say, look, we're doing this specifically for people with dementia, but there are lots of other hidden disabilities that have similar issues. I always bring up the subject of autism because it is something I know quite a lot about, because I've got a couple of members of my family who are on the spectrum. So I will use that one as well. And I think the techniques that I talk about for people with dementia and the design of the ambulances would be similar, if not the same. So, you know, the co-production is there, and people with hidden disabilities like autism is not the only disability that they have. I have another one, and I can say that I can use that one as well. So yes, there is the opportunity to do that, and I think people are always grateful for that information. I've never had anyone, I don't think we've ever had anyone that's you know, found it objectionable. I think everybody understands you know, what you know, I'm talking about, really. But as I say, the dementia is the 90% approach, if I'm honest, but there is still 10% that you're able to say, you know, this is something else that will benefit others. So I hope that answers.
Thanks very much.
I hope it answers the question.
I think he does. Hannah's nodding, that's grand. So Liam is next, and then I think it was Kerry. So Liam next.
Yes, so don't worry, not a question. It's more of a couple of other bits to wrap around you, if I may. So I hadn't intended to speak particularly because I knew Alison would do a brilliant job, but there's something in this conversation which I think is worth highlighting, which is how closely this work aligns to our overarching clinical strategy and how the various strands are exemplified and pulled together through this work. So if we think about clinical leadership, we have a consultant practitioner, so a consultant nurse leading the mental health team with a number of specialists working in areas supporting care delivery. We've got, when we talk about co-production, actually I think we've got a really good example of co-production because it stretches beyond the clinician and the patient or the service user. Actually, it's co-production across into our digital team, it's co-production across into our fleet, and how that all hangs together. And achieving that, Alison, is some mean feat, you know, to actually get to a place where everyone can talk a common language in each of those areas, have a shared purpose, and come to something that is a good solution, which Andy is so clearly articulating is quite impressive. I think we've done some really good stuff around the face-to-face, and again, we've talked to that, and that's going to require us to think about investment at a national level, as an organisation and with our partners. The evaluation, I think, is going to be very clear in the benefits of Rita. It's going to be clear in the work we've done with our fleet that we would want to replicate that at a faster rate, I would anticipate, than a fleet replacement programme is going to drive. And so there is something here around the prioritisation over the next 2 to 3 years of how we support people with dementia and other mental health conditions, whereby the nature of our business, the nature of using our services can be more crisis invoking. I think the trick, and Alison referred to this in our next phase, has to be thinking about what does this mean in a remote space. As we move to a more planned urgent care environment, then our interventions are for longer, potentially, and therefore how we are using remote technology, how we're enabling our staff, how we're working with patients and their families. Really important what you said there, Andy, in terms of how we support your family to feel calmer in order that you can feel calm. Those remote interventions that we can offer in that space will be really, really important. I think quantifying value is going to be difficult. And I guess that's why I wanted to say all of this, because we are going to be in a very constrained economic environment within the NHS over the next few years. And so the evaluation, Alison leading on specific elements of the work we're doing, but the population level understanding of what are all the interventions that add value, that reduce the level of demand on overarching NHS services, that reduce the demand on the public sector, and enable and support families and people with dementia is going to be critical. So evaluation and quantifying value will be critical. And for us, that's important, and I'll finish in a moment, because some of this is in our gift, what we choose to prioritise, but some of this is also in the gift of Welsh Government and others, where we have specific funding lines that are supporting this. You know, that's not open-ended, that will come under challenge, as will the conversations that we need to have with health boards over services. So I particularly like your sharing is the first time I've heard it, Andy. I know you, as Colin said, you've been here before, but hearing you speak has been really valuable. So thank you very much. But I think it's a perfect example of how all of the strands of our organisation knit together to make a really positive difference on that 1999 call that somebody might make on a given day of the week.
Good. Thanks very much. That's an interesting reflection on the remote issue, isn't it? And perhaps some of the video triaging and things might have a role to play maybe in that. So Kerry, I think next, and then I think we might be. Oh no, it's Andy, isn't it? So Kerry.
Thank you. So a couple of observations and then a question. So my first observation is last week I was out with ambulance care and we took 2 dementia patients to a day facility, and I saw firsthand the care of the 2 staff there, and actually the experience. I asked both patients about their experience, and it's really powerful because actually you wouldn't even know that the patient had dementia, but actually the crew were incredible. And I was asking them later then, what are the risks, what are the challenges around that? And it was really interesting to understand some of the risks that can materialize, but it was a really smooth journey. I think my other observation, I think in the papers today I saw a figure that the number of people that we've been called out to with dementia in the last 6-month period, I think I want to say is something like 1,300, and actually that really quite shocked me. So I think it just underlines the importance of this work. But as chair of the charitable funds and the charitable committee, I think as we are currently in the process of looking at what our strategic priorities are. And I think there's such a great opportunity here to think about, okay, what is it that the public sector, what is it that government should be doing? But how can we add value for the charity? So my question is, have we considered a research partner? So of course, there's lots of evaluation going on, but if we really want to access funds, say from trusts or, I suppose even philanthropy, and there are lots of opportunities, I think, around dementia, but we're going to need some fairly robust evidence to make that case. And there may be an opportunity for us to bring in a research partner, which may not cost us too much money or may even be free.
So I love it, brilliant. Yes, I mean there's so many opportunities there too. I think you're exactly right, and following on from what Liam is saying as well around, we need to be quantifying some of this and really proving its worth with regards to the impact we have on people affected by dementia across our services. In particular with the RETA work, it's a conversation I was having yesterday actually with Denbighshire Council, because there are new dementia standards in Wales. There's a lot of focus on dementia care, lots of money being thrown. Great. All local authorities, all health boards are invested in RETA. So this company who are based in Chester, My Improvement Network, all health boards, all local authorities are invested in RETA. So what we're trying to do is look at the sort of patient journey between care home, ambulance, hospital sort of handover. Care homes and health boards, hospitals have many more RETA units than we do. We've only got 20 to 25. So what we were chatting about yesterday with some of the work with the local authorities was exactly this. Let's do some research. Let's look at the impact. We've got some lovely data, lovely sort of narrative, lovely case studies about the impact, but we need to be doing more to formulate that into some sort of selling point to say this works. These are some funding opportunities that we'd like to go down. If there's opportunities within the trust or outside the trust, we will follow them to get some additional monies to invest more heavily, because like I say, Wales is heavily invested in this technology now. So we're really keen in us to be working with those partners to make sure we're all talking the same language about some of these reminiscence approaches and some of this, the software that's on these units. So would love to explore that opportunity, because it did come up yesterday about how we need to be doing more research around the impact of these units.
Can I say there's lots of universities that would love with Welsh Government funding, because there is money that you can apply for. I recently applied for a research grant to look at the training of carers in care homes and the control of medication, because they tend to medicate people with dementia to make life easier, perhaps. I don't want to accuse all care homes of doing that, but I think and they probably don't do it a lot, but they shouldn't. We're trying to sort of get to a situation where they use it less and less, and I think that's down to the training that the carers get. So we applied for a research grant, and we've got 2 care homes in the Newport area and 2 care homes in Wrexham, and so that we're covering North and South Wales, and we've got 2 researchers that are going into those care homes that have been seconded, and there's an academic who is based at Cardiff University who is going to write up the study and is involved in that, and that came out of a grant for, I think, £150,000 that we got, and it's a 2-year study. So Bangor is really interested in dementia. They've got a dementia MSc, so they reach, they would, if we can get the support from the Welsh government for the research, I think they'd love to take on a study as you're mentioning, really.
Thanks for those 2 comments. Is that okay, Kerry? I'm just conscious of time that we need to start thinking about wrapping this session up. Unfortunately, we've got two more contributors who wish to come in. Brendan wants to come in a moment, but Andy, you're next in the queue.
Mine's very brief and fabulous work, by the way. You mentioned about your attendance at Swansea University and the students really getting, I can imagine that absolutely was superb. So we have a program that runs across Wales as well. Have you access to that program?
Connected, yeah.
That cool. I was just checking if not, but that's all.
Yeah. Okay. And so I think final word, if we probably can, then to you, Ben.
Okay, thanks. Just a couple of points. Firstly, people are probably aware we are one of the most active ambulance trusts in terms of research across the UK, and we do have a team that's constantly looking out for these opportunities. So if anything does come along, I'm fairly confident our team will pick up on that. Second one is, as many of my colleagues will be aware, but my mother died last month following a long illness with dementia. And just to reassure Andy, it's not just your family. All non-clinical family members are absolutely useless in a crisis. I can tell you that. But
well, I always say, as a carer and a family member, you're living with dementia too.
Yes.
So that's the important thing to remember.
Yes, and I'm very aware of the impact it has on families. But during her illness, we did have several occasions when the ambulance service was called out. And we need to be careful with some of these calls because some of them are for people with dementia and some of them are due to the dementia. But what I would like to say is the quality of the service that was received was generally outstanding, and I've written to several of the staff that called out, who did really good jobs. And I think probably the most significant thing was certainly a few years ago with some of the issues that came up. I am sure that the first response would have been, let's take them to hospital. And that clearly was not the primary objective. They were prepared to take the time, try to sort things out, keep the patient at home. So that work, I think, is resonating throughout the service, and it was good to see.
It's nice to hear. And I'm sorry about the loss of you.
That's fine.
Thanks very much, Ben. And I think that's timely because it does really resonate with me in terms of the inverting the triangle strategy, that as more and more people are going to be living with dementia for longer, more and more of them will be living in their own communities, in their own homes. And if we can find ways within our means, with limited funds, that can make a big impact on the lives of those people and to reduce conveyance to hospitals, we're achieving, 2 goals in one, really, which is great. So I think all it remains really is for me to give you a huge thank you for coming. It's been a really lively and interesting conversation. We've all gained a huge amount from it. I hope you have as well. I hope, Alison, some of the ideas, I know you were frantically writing some ideas. I thought Kerry's interjections about the charity work that she's kind of really leading on at the moment, and we've got big ambitions for our charity activities in the trust. That may well be something that we could see develop much further. So a really big thank you from me, and wish you both well. And we'll take just a couple of minutes break while you sort yourselves out, and then we'll carry on with our board meeting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much. Good to see you again. If anybody wants a quick break whilst we're just rearranging the room, whatever, then please do. Just a couple of minutes, and then we'll start back on. Right, we've got two more items on the agenda before we take the formal coffee break. And that is the issues around progress to mitigate against the avoidable harm, the risk register, and actually the IMTP. So next item is item 9, and it's over to Jason for the paper which has been presented on the actions to mitigate against the avoidable patient's harm, our 2 highest risks. And in this, by the way, what we'll do, as we did last time, is we'll ask the committee chairs to speak to this in relation to their AAA reports where it's relevant. And obviously we'll go back to those AAA reports later in the agenda to do other things, but we'll bring those issues around avoidable harm and those high risks into this conversation at one place.
Thanks, Chair. So this is the 5th update to Trust Board on actions to avoid or to mitigate avoidable harm. I won't read through and talk to the paper, but there's just 4 things I want to highlight in general terms around this, and then happy to take any questions, probably with support from Rachel and Lee on some of the detail. So in general, we are seeing a slow reduction in lost hours. Lost hours continue to remain too high, but we are seeing overall a declining trend, but it's not steep enough. We have seen some improvements to response times, particularly in some localities around red and amber at the amber median. There is still work to do, and progress does need to continue to be monitored, but we are seeing gradual improvements as we see a reduction in the totality of the lost hours. I would at this point just draw the board's attention to the graph on page 6 of the paper. So this is particularly the second graph on page 6 of the paper, which demonstrates the reduction in 4-hour or more handover delays in Cardiff and the Vale. You can see a steep decline towards the back end of last year, a position which they have maintained, and they've now gone further than the 4-hour backstop, which has been agreed nationally, and locally implemented a 2-hour backstop, which they are also delivering. And I think, Lee, the latest position at Cardiff is we've got average handover times in the order of about 20 minutes at Cardiff.
Yeah, average lost
down to lost hours. So significant improvements to we can see from the graph here the peak of where they were about a year ago, but also demonstrates to others across Wales that it can be done. So with those improvements, particularly in the Cardiff area, we are seeing commensurate improvements in response times or patient waiting times in the community. And then the 4th thing to say, and just I guess for comfort, Chair, is that you'll recall, I think time before last, we discussed the additional actions we've been designing to add to the action plan we'd already had. The first of those, which will go live, will be around action to reduce what we call our multiple attendance ratio. So that's where we've got multiple vehicles attending a single incident. The intention there, of course, is to free up that existing resource to be able to deploy that in a more efficient and effective way to other resources, to other calls. So therefore generate improved patient waiting times as a result of better use of those resources. That will go live imminently. We'll be checking in on a date for that on Wednesday next week, and I suspect that will be within the next week or two. So a general trend of improvement. It's slow. Some areas where we've got really good improvement, which become a beacon for others to follow, and some of those additional actions which we touched on time before last now coming to fruition, being turned on, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, questions? Yes, Martin.
It's a bit of a curate's egg, this report. I mean, it's so important to have this report because the danger is this becomes normalized, if you like, and we start to get used to these high levels of poor performance. A couple of questions, a couple of comments really on the graph, which is the one. It's the graph that shows Betsy Cadwallader. Oh, that's the one. It's on page 5.
Yeah.
Now, my assumption looking at that is that Betsy is an outlier. Well, actually, per head of population, they're probably not. So it might be better. I'm wondering if we're getting data that tells us how good or bad they are in relation to each other, because these are just numbers. If you, because Betsy Cadwallader is a third of Wales, isn't it? It's about 1 million, just over 1 million. So it might be better to get some degree of comparability, if you like, on a per person basis or something, just to give us a better comparison, rather than, because every time I've looked at this, I thought, oh, there you go, everybody's in the middle. Cardiff's doing really well, which they are, incidentally. That's the light at the end of this tunnel, in my view. But Betsy may be not as bad as this graph tends to suggest. But I think the comment that you've made on your executive summary under paragraph 5 is the one that really worries me. It says the likelihood that the level of avoidable harm will continue. Now, this report goes back, as it demonstrates, it's like 2 years old now, 2 years. It's not getting better. Cardiff is. We've done a lot, and it would be a damn sight worse if we hadn't, that's for sure. But I don't get the impression. It was really interesting looking at another graph. I won't look it up now, but the anticipated coming down to 0, I mean, it's gone like that. And actually, the results have gone in the opposite. So it's just as well we had our target, I thought. Thank God for that. If we hadn't had the target, it'd be even worse, possibly, on the assumption that people are doing things, but it's not working as well as it could be. So it's depressing in that sense. But Cardiff, I keep coming back, Cardiff are doing it. So why isn't everybody else? I know it's a rhetorical question, you know, and nobody in this room can answer it probably, but it is worth making that point, isn't it? That we are seeing harmed patients as a consequence of potentially things that can be achieved in other hospitals that would bring this down to 0. And that's what worries me, is we keep seeing this every time you present the report, Jason. And it's nothing to do with it. It's just an observation that people, are they taking this seriously or not? I don't know.
Kevin, no one's to come in.
Yeah,
So if I come,
yes, do that, and
and
then
take care, and then take care. So on the, there's probably three things in there. Lee, I wonder if you could perhaps, and I saw you fiddling with your laptop, so you're probably pulling up some data. On Martin's point about the graph on 5, of course, you're right, Martin, this is totality of lost hours. That's what it shows. But what we also do show and measure and monitor is the average handover per arrival at each site. So I think Lee will probably talk to that in a second. I wonder, Rachel, if you could talk to ICAPS on Martin's point about, you know, the 5th point in the executive summary. And then on the final point, Martin, and perhaps I'll just respond to around others, we do know that AB, so Nara and Bevan, the Grange, for argument's sake, have recently implemented, I think week before last from memory, the 4-hour backstop. Now, you know, it's later than planned, but they have accepted that that needs to be done. It's a bit early to tell, you know, what impact the actions they're taking locally to deliver that are actually having, but they have committed to that. And I've certainly had 2 conversations with the chief executive of Nara and Bevan about it to get it moving. And I know that other health board colleagues are also taking note, particularly West Wales has got some discussion ongoing, but you know, the point you make, Martin, is fair. You know, this has been a long-standing, deeply entrenched issue for us. Every opportunity we get, both through the peer groups and I get with, you know, with government and others, we make the point, and we are now continually, you know, drawing attention to the great work that Cardiff is doing, because we can see, you know, there is a correlation, a direct correlation between a reduction in lost hours and an improvement in our ability to respond to patients in the community. It's clear. So every opportunity we get, we're ramming it home.
I think it's important. I mean, the one thing I like, if you can like something about this, is that you present it. It's you, the chief executive, of bringing this to our attention as the individual around this table. So it's not delegated. This is important business, even though it's sort of, you know, it's a lot to do with other people. So thank you for that. And I don't know if
So Lee, do you want to just talk to the average perhaps, and then Rachel on ICAPS? Okay, and then Kevin, yeah.
Yes, because it is a really fair question on the hours. So I did go straight into a mode of blue to pull out. So Cardiff and the Val, and these are very recent weeks. So Cardiff and the Val have an average handover of 40 minutes, hence that sort of 20, 25 that we'd like to ideally be clawing back. So there's still some more to go there. But when you start to compare that, Betsy exceeds 2 hours. Swansea Bay, however, when you do look at Morriston, thinking that's one ED for the health board, it's 2.5 to 3 hours. So Swansea Bay actually has by far the worst position at the moment, but Betsy are close behind them. So yes, whilst the number is higher on an average basis, they are still very high. Just to add more to what Jason has said, yes, and Ira Bevan in with the 4 hours, too early to talk. The Royal Glamorgan went in with the 4 hours a couple of weeks prior to an Ira Bevan, and there is a plan to see that move across to POW. So ComTAF, I think there is some movement that's happening, and also as said, Cardiff and the Val actually pushed on the health board comparison reporting for 2 hours to be included, and they are below the 2 hours, but we are seeing now all the data on 4 and 2 hours across health boards. So I would describe the current position as the tanker feels like it may start to be turning.
Yeah. Very encouraging.
And
because it's good as conversation is all wrapped around our 2 highest risks of avoidable harm and long delays. Oh, sorry, do you want to Rachel? Sorry, my apologies. No, you're right. Just let Rachel do that and then come to you. Sorry.
Yeah, so in terms of the process for bringing some of this to the fore, we've got regular monthly meetings now with each health board, which is called an ICAP meeting, Integrated Commissioning Action Plan, which is designed to drive down their handover delays. So ops colleagues come and press performance information, and have also been sharing the learning that we've had from Cardiff. We've also got a series of, options, I suppose, that we're putting to them to say these are things that we think could help, that we can see in other parts of Wales, that other people are doing, that we could, bring to your attention. So that's helpful. I was just going to mention as well, Jason, that the ministerial target on the 6 goals programme and through the IMTP process is that there will be no 4 hours. So the target was for last year, but the target is now at the end of this financial year, there will be no 4 hours across Wales. And of course, you'll have seen in the papers that we have now had some confirmation that there's non-recurrent funding to support the 100 extra staff that we had last year. And in that letter from Welsh Government, they link the 2 things. So there is a slight implication that if handover delays continue, actually the funding of that 100 needs to come from the health boards. So it's not massively explicit and obvious how it would happen, but there is the start of a link, which I think might be driving then health boards to be thinking, actually we need to resolve these issues sooner rather than later, which is helpful.
Good, thank you, Kevin. Sorry for the delay.
Yeah, a lot of this is getting wider sort of distribution around networks, and the vice chairs, although not in their remit, have taken an interest in this more recently. I think the Cardiff and Vale example is colleagues remember HIW's report about learned helplessness. Cardiff and the Vale have obviously looked themselves in the mirror and said we've got to get out of that mode of behavior. So the human factors at play there have meant ownership and looking at the detail and how they can make things better. So I've shared that with the vice chairs group, and that's sort of going out there. I do wonder with VCU though whether what we're seeing is a normal distribution reflective of the 3 hospitals and the population at risk within those 3 discrete areas that feed into those hospitals, or whether
the population at risk of North Wales is such, and the services is higher, and the services are not there to meet the need. So the default option is where our challenge lies. So it might be a bit more complex than the numbers, is what I'm. Well, it is more complex than the numbers, isn't it? So I guess the ownership and the human interaction of what's happening in one place, the more all of us can do, I think, to support that behavioural change would be really helpful.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to go through. Brendan wanted to come in. I think Liam, is that right? And then Paul. So Brendan and then Liam.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the situation in BCU is quite complex because not only is it the 3 hospitals, but it's the way that they've centralised some of the services and the inability that they have to push the flow through, having made those decisions. I just want to say the reason that we focus on the handover is not because, you know, it demonstrates resources, it's because it is clearly associated with patient harm. And just to go back to the AACE audit that was carried out, so over 8 out of 10 patients suffered some harm when the handover delays were beyond 60 minutes, with just under 9% experiencing potentially severe harm. So the thing that is slightly worrying is when we see health boards talking about a backstop of 4 hours, because they have to realize that they are accepting that they're putting in a target that is already associated with patient harm. And what we must be absolutely focused on is that when they achieve their 4 hours, if they achieve their 4 hours, we don't sit back and give them a pat on the back. There has to be a relentless focus on driving this down to a minimum of what we're seeing Cardiff achieving.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah.
Just speak with care on a board about another board, but I think that there's just an observation. We know that the change in Cardiff and Vale came through the result. There was some executive changes, and to come back to that, it wasn't about learned helplessness. It was more and triumvirate of executives that came into role that took a particular view to prioritise this as a key measure for their organisation's performance internally and externally. Their leadership to it has been really clear in terms of clinical outcomes, patient safety, community safety, and their leadership to it has been clear that they are providing data that supports clinicians within the hospital to see how patients are treated in the right bed first time, which has multiple benefits for them as clinicians directly, because they're not traipsing around the hospital trying to find the patients all the time, but also because they've got the right specialists in the right places treating the right people. So there are a number of things that Cardiff and the Vale have been able to bring to bear at that point, at that moment in time. And the conversations that I know Brendan and myself and you're having with our colleagues is you can hear people trying to translate that into their own space. Now for the care bit, that requires a huge amount of attention. It requires a huge amount of diligence. And so in the work that I'm doing with Angela, for example, with Betsy, that others will be engaged with, this is an area where we need to be incredibly good partners, and we probably need to lean in with a bit more care and a little bit more understanding. We all would recognise what has been published in terms of the challenges faced by their board. Working through that level of challenge and having the level of detailed forensic attention to this issue within your portfolio is a big ask. So I suppose I just say from our perspective, we absolutely, be under no illusion, I'm blunt as blunt can be in the right places. But there is something about specifically for for Betsy, how as board partners, as health partners, we recognise the challenge. We're not going to get what Cardiff and Vale have been able to give in terms of 3 of their executive pretty much, big chunks of their time only on getting this one thing nailed. So there's a balance that I suppose is what I'm suggesting, Chair, that we need to be aware of for them. Doesn't mean we let them off the hook. It doesn't mean we don't have a grip, but it maybe is a little bit more of an understanding of the journey for their leadership teams across their footprint.
Thanks, Liam. Paul, did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up the our people issues related, because we talk a lot about the effect on patients, but at the People and Culture Committee and at WASP, actually, we looked at the direct relationship of diesel fumes, for example, and the concerns that our staff have and how that relates to handover delay and mitigations that are being put in place. So there is a direct correlation between those two things. And there are two other things that there may be a correlation, which the committee's asked for further work on. One is about, there's been a steep rise in violence and aggression incidents. Now, is that related to community weights, frustration by family, friends, etc.? We've asked for further work on that to really look at whether that is as a result of delay. And the second one, which Angie and I have discussed quite a lot, is our highest reason for absence is stress. And it's an umbrella term, stress, mental illness, and we have asked that we do a deep dive on that to really understand. Now, we recognize that, shift overruns, not having your meal breaks, being out of area, all those things have an impact on staff. But we really do need to understand that potential correlation between stress, because we don't actually distinguish stress related to out of work or in work, or what part of work that causes stress. So there's definitely not only a patient incident issue, but there's also the effect on people. So Bethan and I, as chairs of those Quest and PCC, have a lot of correlation to do because one impacts on the other and vice versa. So just want to bring up the people aspect.
Good, thanks very much. So I think that's timely just to kind of close this particular item by just reference to the AAA reports, if we may. And so if I can just ask, we'll just go around the chairs, just want to bring out if there were anything in your, particularly in your alert sections of that paper, which relate to these two highest risks and particularly to the handover delays. And I think, Bethan, you're going to be talking both as yourself and Quest and also on behalf of JOGA 11P. That's okay.
That's right, yes, thank you, Chair. As always, the majority of the agenda at Quest related to those two top risks and very much around handover delays and the impact on patients and avoidable harm, etc. As members will have seen from the AAA report, and I think it's really important, the comment that was made earlier, we can't become complacent because there was still 23,000 lost hours in April, that's 25% of our resourcing capability. And that in itself tells us there is avoidable harm happening without a shadow of a doubt. So it's good to see an improving trend, but it's still a really, really worrying trend. And this was brought to light for us with our patient story at the Quest meeting. So a little bit of a different type of patient story for us at Quest this time, because it was shared from a staff member's perspective, a volunteer's perspective. Keith Jones, one of our community first responders, highlighted the impact on the individual that he was called out to support, but also we could visibly see the impact on him actually as a result of all of the delays. The committee were very aware of all of the very many actions being undertaken by WASP, and there's been so many actions undertaken, and there is clear improvement to be seen in various areas. However, they can't begin to mitigate against the level of harm that's happening because of the significant number of handover delays. And we were seeing that in relation to the number of concerns still being received and the impact on the staff as well as a result of that, not just through the number, but the complexity and significance of the concerns. The immediate release directive refusals, which are still very high for Amber 1, and we know that's a particular category that does lead to avoidable harm, so that was a concern for us. And there were so very many incidents linked to timelines. So the committee, as you'll see from our AAA report, did stress again, we feel there needs to be more pace system-wide with this in terms of trying to affect change at a strategic level. And it was interesting to hear your comments, Liam, in terms of Cardiff and the Vale and some of the approaches they've adopted. There was continuous examples of very poor patient experience, as well as avoidable harm throughout there, and the continuing risk of harm. We looked at our business assurance framework, and we've made an amendment within that whereby the actions for the system partners on effecting the change that's needed, they are now shown in the commentary box, which we felt was easier then for us to follow through, so that we could focus in on the worst actions and our performance against achieving those. We had quite a lengthy discussion around our 2 highest risks, 2 to 3 and 2 to 4, and they remain at the score of 25. And there was some discussion around, how long can risks remain at that high level. But what we were assured by is the fact that the mitigation, the actions are changing. So we are using this as a working document. It is affecting some change and some improvement from our end. We've seen that. And we felt comfortable that the risks should remain at that level at this point in time. I briefly mentioned the putting things right team, the number of complaints, and it was interesting. We had a discussion around the topic whereby we have invested additional resources into this team, and yet we are not seeing any improvement in performance. But that is simply because of the continuing exceptionally high volumes and the complexity of the complaints, and therefore the time needed to deal with those. The really important thing here, which I think links directly to how we take this forward and how we can gain some improvement. The duty of candour is likely to place additional stress on our PTR teams and other colleagues, and we need to look at that moving forward. I am aware that you are looking at that, Liam. You're starting to see if things can be done differently in order to improve that. With regards to the patient safety, patient harm, I think those were the points. There are other points I wanted to draw out from the AAA report.
We'll do that later when we,
yeah,
absolutely, yeah. So then when we come back to that on the agenda, we'll obviously not be talking about these 2 risks, but other items. That's
okay.
Good. Was there anything that Jogger
in the finance and performance, we see the same, reports. We look at the 2 top risks in all of the committees. So the theme certainly did come out there. Having said that, there's nothing more to add really than what I've said for Quest, but some of those points were discussed in F&P as well.
Martin, was there anything on the audit committee?
Well, the only thing that came up on audit, I guess, was the reference to the effectiveness of the board committees, and to some extent, I mean, if there's reference in here to the fact that when this was written, we were going to have a discussion which we've now had, but that hasn't been reported on by audit committee. But what's interesting, isn't it, is the issue that Kerry's just talked about, coming back to the effectiveness of the board committees now. Kerry's talked about it. Paul will definitely talk about it. He's already mentioned it, the fact that the People and Culture Committee are focusing on things that are impacted by some of the things that came from Jason's report earlier. One of the things that I think we're sorted out, I guess, is that we're happy with where the discussions are taking place, whether it's in F&P, whether it's in Quest, whether it's in People and Culture. Audit has this oversight, if you like, and can advise the board about it. I think we've got it here now through Jason's report. This discussion, to some extent, is evidencing that fact. The one thing that maybe we need to consider, not necessarily today, but is the partnership arrangements we've got, which could be addressed, or we could use, or should use to address some of these issues. In other words, we talk about what we can do, and including putting pressure on other organizations, but what we can do actually as an organization to improve things. But there's also maybe something to talk about in terms of how we work, maybe at a board level, with other organizations. To improve this situation that doesn't seem to be going away. And yes, we might be making progress in some places, but it's slow, it's tortuous, it's time consuming. And maybe, there is something around that. That came out of the board effectiveness framework and discussion. So maybe for another day, but certainly something worth bearing in mind, Chairman.
Good, thanks, Martin. And Paul, I know you've spoken already. Is there anything else you want to add? Or we
no,
cover that?
The issue about the PTR team again, Bethan's brought that out. We discussed it in Quest, we discussed it in People and Culture, the pressure on that team and what support we're offering.
Yeah.
So that's all brief.
Right. And Estelle, you just wanted to come in?
Yeah, just quickly responding to Martin's point there on the partnership piece. We recently had some exec meetings both with Betsy actually and DHCW, so Digital Healthcare Wales, recognising there's they've got a broad spectrum of issues of their own. On the Regional Partnership Board front, board members may or may not be aware that there's now a directive from Welsh Government that we be a core member of all regional partnership boards, and you'll know that over the last few years we've been knocking the door and have managed to get into, I think, 4.5, as I describe it. The only one left, interestingly, to contact us now, given the new directive, is an Iron Bevan, so Gwent. Otherwise, Rachel and I will now service those partnership board arrangements between us. And in terms of North Wales, I've just recently been elected the Vice Chair of the North Wales RPB. So that will give us some different leverage, I think, in that space, recognising RPBs have specific responsibilities, but it won't hurt, let's put it that way, to keep it on the agenda.
Good, thanks. Well, look, we spent quite a lot of time on that, but I think it's right that we do, because they are our two highest risks. We have to avoid with great determination not to enter into the learned helplessness arena. We're conscious that the 25 risks stay at 25, and that's, I'm sure, the right thing to do. What we've been asked to do on this item is to note the report and to consider whether there are any further actions available to the Trust. I think we've given it a good consideration, so I think we've probably done that today. And no doubt we'll continue to do it as our other board meetings progress through the year. So on that point, let's move on then to item 10. So Trish, it's over to you for the corporate risk register.
Thanks, Chair. I won't rehearse what we just discussed on risk 223 and 224 because what you've got there is the embodiment, the formal embodiment of the BAF that's been through the committees, and you'll see the narrative. Thanks, Bethan, for pulling that out, because we've discussed whether we can reduce that score, and clearly we can't, but we felt that that was a good halfway point. So that together with the report that we've just had, I think is a good way for us to keep our eye on this going forward. Just a couple of things to point out. The other two high risks, 160 and 201, were also fully reviewed at People and Culture Committee. You've got the additional information in the exec summary, and of course Angie and Estelle here today if there's anything to elaborate on that. There's one new risk, which is the civil contingency risk that's been added into the BAF since the last meeting. The Finance Performance Committee did a deep dive on risk 139, which is included in the AAA report. And just two other things. You've got the guidance there, which was distributed around before, around the interpretation of the BAF, which I hope is helpful. And I think also there's some developing risks that we've pulled out there in the report. And just one correction from the January paper, please, Chair, just on the record, I think there was just a transposing of that number. It should have been that risk 244 was closed, so if we can just correct that for the record. But I won't rehearse what we've already been through for those two highest risks.
No, that's fine. So before we just go to confirm the recommendation that we're asked them to note, are there any questions, Trish? We've all got the paper, I think, haven't we? So there are a number of things we're asked to do, just to run through them. We're noting to note the review to each principal risk. We've done that. Note the inclusion of civil contingencies risk. We note that correction that Trish mentioned. We've received the guidance, which was, I think, useful. We note the development of a suite of new risks, and we note an update on the risk registers transformation program. So we've done all that. So that's good. We're catching up. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Trish. So we move to the next item before the break, which is the final item before the break, which is over to you, I think, Rachel, for the IMTP.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I won't pull out anything specific from the report, as people will have had a chance to read it. It did also, a more detailed version of this went to F&P, which pulled out some of the more detail, particularly around some of the amber performance areas. So I think just the two things that are not in the paper I'm just going to add. One is it talks about how we're going to be monitoring this year's IMTP and some of the progress my team are making on that. And just to note that we're expecting a view from Welsh Government in terms of whether the IMTP is approved or not in early June. And as I alluded to a minute ago, having had the letter from Welsh Government confirming the non-recurrent funding for the additional staff, which was the area of biggest risk from a financial perspective. I don't think we're assuming anything other than our IMTP will be approved, but obviously we'll wait for that. And then the last thing I was just going to note is, in looking forward to next year's IMTP, Chair, we had a good conversation last week, and at our board development next time in June, we're going to be spending some time thinking about that process and how we might strengthen that IMTP going forward into next year, and it's linked to the strategy. So that was something to look forward to.
Thank you. Good. Thanks so much. Any questions to Rachel? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just in Jolga's absence, because obviously to raise the point that Rachel made about the IMTP, we did have a detailed discussion at that committee, and I think it's important to mention at Trust Board, really, there was wide acknowledgement that despite the very difficult operating climate, there were huge achievements and progress made against our IMTP in the last year. So we acknowledged that, and we thanked officers for their work in those areas.
Okay, well, in that case, we have miraculously actually caught up. So let's have our break. I was going to suggest it's only 10 minutes, but actually we've caught up. So let's have the 15-minute break that we are scheduled, that Tricia's kindly gave us on the agenda. So if we can be prompt to meet back at 25 minutes to 12, we will press on with part 2. Still missing Jason. I know he was called upstairs for some reason or other. The next item is finance. I'm sure Jason understands finances inside out as well from all of his time working with the exec team. So I think rather than wait for him, we'll crack on. So let's thank you for coming back so promptly, and on to item 12 and over to Chris for financial update.
Thank you, Michelle. I'll just call a few things out from the paper. I'll take it as read and just add a few bits and pieces if I can. Obviously, this builds on a fairly detailed discussion actually we had at Finance Performance Committee a week or so ago, which was based around a presentation of the position because of timing rather than the paper itself. We did have quite a discussion, as you will see probably come through from some of the updates from the committee as well. Obviously, we know we got a challenge in outlook, and I've no doubt that as we get in later through the year, particularly probably from the next meeting onwards, once we'll have a more sort of quarter one position, and month 3 onwards, we'll probably spend more focus on this year. This is just a month 1 position. It's based on 1 month of the new year, ensuring we've embedded in the budgets that we set and approved last time. I think a couple of things I would just sort of pull from it, though we've touched on a few of these already, but I think paragraph 3 of the paper has got a couple of bullet points in there which pose sort of the key sort of assumptions that continue to be made in our position. We've mentioned already that as we were finalising this paper, and as literally in reality 10 minutes before going into the finance performance discussion on it a week or so ago, that the letter from government that's been referenced already landed around the 100 and the circa 6 million funding, which is good news in the sense of one of the risks that we were carrying into this year, as we know, for this year's perspective. It's maybe not as permanent a funding sort of confirmation as we would have liked, but non-recurrent funding potentially through this year again. And as we mentioned, linking it to the levels of delays and EDs, and we will have to keep an eye on that in terms of what does that mean and when does that trigger something different and how we manage that if we need to. But in the shorter term, the funding for the costs we're currently incurring has been confirmed to us. The other bullet point there talks about the update around the savings and the gap. As we know, when we approved the plan at the outset of the year, there was a residual gap of savings that we needed to make. There's been some progress on that. Circa £1 million further of the 2.5 that was outstanding at that point in time has been further identified and has now a reasonable level of confidence in delivery. But there's still some elements still to go, and the paper does provide a bit of a brief update at the very least on some of the work still progressing and areas being tracked down to deliver on that through the financial sustainability programme and elsewhere, and in particular, particular thanks to Lee and his leadership in the ops team in targeting the ops directorate for a big chunk of that residual savings requirement, which we'll bring through once plans further emerge for that. We touched on risk, and in particular risk 139, which is a key risk for all of this. We did have a longer discussion at the committee and had done quite a bit of work ahead of the committee in reviewing the risk, including the scoring, and where we are with mitigations against that. The paper does, at the start of the year, there's going to be more risks. Our response from Welsh Government to our submission of this is we've probably got quite a lot of risks which they want us to reconsider, and we will as we go through, and some of the risks probably even described in the plan around, for example, pay awards not being fully funded. Well, I had a conversation with Director of Finance colleagues on Friday where it was very clear from that conversation that isn't our risk. That's a Welsh Government risk in terms of making sure that the funding is available for any of the pay awards that come through. So that'll be revised as we go forward over the next month or so. And the last one was, we'll touch on it a bit later when we do the update from F&P as well. But you'll see a summary of the capital programme that we've agreed now through some detailed work we've had to do to reprioritise some elements of it, both within the subgroup structures that we got, but a joint meeting we had at exec and ADLT assistant directors level a few weeks ago to finalise. And again, Finance Performance Committee had a more detailed update on some of that. So I think that was the key elements for me, Chair. The paper's got a number of requests to the board, but all of them essentially are to note the paper and the update so far.
Good, thanks, Chris. It is, of course, month one only, so we can't take too much from it, but there are things we need to consider.
I'll just reiterate 2 points that I made at F&P, if I may. One, Chris and his team quite clearly have patient experience and quality in mind when they're talking about how the financial picture plays out. I think it's important that we acknowledge that. And the other thing is we just have to be conscious in the wider health arena that while these figures are important to us, the numbers are important to us, they're kind of accounting rounding up figures or rounding down figures in other bigger, much bigger organizations. So we've got to be careful that they don't see it as minor in the way. And I know, Chris, you're in the conversations with your colleagues around that, but we just got to be careful that people don't get a perception that this is quite trivial and a rounding figure, rather than actually it's really important to an organization like this. Just those 2 points.
Yeah, I mean, it is an early report, but it is very encouraging, and we should appreciate the work that Chris and indeed Lee, because a lot of Lee's staff and managers are the people who are going to produce, particularly the savings associated, because the biggest risk with this is the achievement of savings.
It is now, yeah, definitely.
And the only other thing to bear in mind, I guess, is that future years, which was, I think, Kevin's point to some extent, is the context. It's going to get worse potentially. So we need to start thinking and planning for future years that, this isn't a one-off. This is going to carry on for the next few years and could even get worse.
There's no certainty on the 100, is there? Beyond this
year?
Beyond
this year, no. It's very clearly not confirmed to us on a recurrent basis currently, yes.
Any other questions to Chris on finance? Just to run through what we were asked to do then, just for the record, we note and regain the assurance in relation to the month one revenue financial position. We note the update in relation to the financial sustainability programme and progress thereof. We note the initial capital programme, but you can talk to the capital programme. And we note the month one Welsh Government monitoring return, which was included in the policy. So that all done, we shall move on, if we may, to, I think, Rachel, item 13, which is assurance relating to the quality data report.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, so this is a report in broadly the same one that has gone to the last 3 committees. Actually, we had more quite recently. So 3 committees have had a good opportunity to reflect on the metrics that are specifically targeted to those committees to review. We've spent a good bit of time, I think, earlier in the meeting reflecting on the harm as a result of pressures in the 909 system. So I thought I just would pull out for the committee's attention those metrics relating to the 111 service. And the reason for pulling that out really is just, I suppose, to remind colleagues that the commissioners of this service and the 111 board remain very concerned about call answering times, less so clinical ringback times. As you can see, actually we've done relatively well in terms of the ability to ring people back, but certainly experience for patients at weekends remains poor in terms of the time taken to answer people's call. And you can see there's some data in here now, which reflects some very recent discussions with commissioners around the funding available in terms of the whole time equivalents, which is good that we've articulated and agreed that, and a clear from a commissioner's perspective that is what they have funding for. But we remain in discussion with them around the kind of wider resource envelope for the 111 service. So just to note, it's not in this paper, but that at the moment we have no further funding available for our 111 digital service through those commissioning arrangements, and some of the clinical leadership posts and operational leadership posts that support that service and are really integral to that service currently are funded outside the 111 envelope, so essentially through other parts of our business. So those conversations are ongoing, and Chris, Liam and I are kind of heavily involved in those discussions, and we hope that we'll continue to make some progress with the commissioners there. But I thought I say we've spent a lot of time today on the 999 service. Important to bring out some of those risks, particularly around funding for the 111 service. But lots of actions you'll see, hopefully, in terms of the call answering in particular, the team's huge numbers of actions that they are taking that are within our gift, particularly around getting going on the re-rostering in the same way that we did with EMS, but many other kind of improvements in efficiency and running of that service, which will be having a positive effect in time. So as I say, all the other metrics have pretty much been discussed in quite some detail at the various committees. So I won't say any further, but happy to take any questions, obviously.
Good, thanks, Rachel. And yes, just to underline that, of course, there's a huge amount of data contained here, and the committees in different guides in different places have been spending many hours actually looking at all of this data. We think that each committee lasts probably 3 to 4 hours or more, and there are 7 committees in total, but there are 4, I guess, are looking at these many hours of forensic detail. Martin.
I'm in danger of asking for more information here than we've already got. But my question is this: there was a suggestion that we take people to hospital who don't need to go there, whether it's 111 or 999. I'm not sure, but do we get any feedback from hospitals who are suggesting that we are taking people there who shouldn't be coming in?
I might go to any of our clinical.
Well, Brendan
in terms of
shot up, so may go to Brendan first, and then perhaps to Liam or to Andy.
Yeah, I frequently ask my medical director colleagues whether we are taking patients inappropriately, and the ED consultants. Overwhelming feedback is that we're not taking patients inappropriately. I think we just have to be careful around patients that we take where it's appropriate, but they don't require admission, and patients that are totally inappropriate. So some people may look at the figures and say, right, you've taken X percentage to ED, they were discharged the same day, no follow-up, not admitted. Did they need to go? Well, the actual answer from the clinician treating them would have been yes, and they had tests and they had serious illness excluded. So we have to be careful about that. But I do regularly contact my MD colleagues and say, if there are any themes that you're picking up on inappropriate admissions, let me know, because if there's a learning need, we will put that in place.
Right. Okay, that's encouraging. Thank you.
Andy or Liam wanted to?
I mean, I'd add to that. That's exactly the case. I mean, none of the patients that we take are turned away at the front door, so they will all have subsequent investigations and diagnostics undertaken and what have you. And so that I do raise an eyebrow when that suggestion comes across, because the follow-up to that, where often if we are taking people who don't need A&E, because I'm confident there will be people that we do take to A&E that don't need A&E, but often that's in the absence of an alternative option. And this is, to me, you know, the ESTEC where we discussed it at the last trust board, in the absence of having robust, reliable 365, 24/7 ED alternatives that we can use instead of A&E, then often the choice will be a bit of a Hobson's choice of, well, that's all I have available to me today. But again, to go back to Brendan's point, is how many of those arrive at the front door and then they're just turned away without anything taking place? It doesn't.
Yeah, please, Liam.
Yeah, so supplementary to that is recognising the absence on occasion or timeliness of alternatives. That is the work we're doing around connected support service that we're developing, thinking about how we can hold patients in the community, how we can inform clinical colleagues on CSD in particular with diagnostic data that might help inform decision making and deployment of our resources. So there is work that's ongoing to think about how else we might be able to contribute into holding patients appropriately, or buying time for them to be able to convey to the correct environment. So, you know, that's an important part of us trying to contribute to the wider system. I think the other thing that I would remark on here, in terms of how you opened the question in terms of data, the real opportunity here is in whole pathway data. So actually, the sooner we can move to analysing data, patient experience, patient outcomes by demographics, by site, geography, etc., the sooner we can do that at an all Wales level, then we'll start to truly understand what variation looks like. At the moment, we haven't got to that understanding, so we have kind of macro understanding at clinical in clinical audit data sets, but it doesn't go down enough. And I think that will be really important. I know DHCW are doing quite a lot of work on that at the moment, but that's for me, that's the holy grail, because we'll be mapping people all the way through, and we'll be able to understand where does a stroke end up, what does the outcome for a stroke for somebody who's had a stroke look like, and actually really, really critically, how do you with the work Andy and his team are doing in particular, how do we start to differentiate what we do at our end in terms of earlier identification of a genuine stroke or a suspected stroke, and those actually we might be able to take further steps to rule out and reduce the overall number going through that pathway. So there's a here and now stuff, there's the ongoing stuff that we all have as conversations with partners, there's what we can do to mitigate, and then there's, I think, in the data space, there's a huge opportunity if we can get our data sorted.
Just from a 111 perspective, I was going to add, I know that, now I'm not sure perhaps when the most recent was done, but I do know that there have been some desktop flow exercises between our teams and health board teams as well. So we've also taken that look from a 111 perspective. I was also going to make the point that Liam's just made, which is more needs to be done to know where the flow of patients, don't they? So we know which services have been accessed before arriving at the ED, which of course at the moment we just don't know.
Okay. Any other points or questions on this topic on the data sets? So we are just asked to determine whether the report provides sufficient assurance, whether further information or scrutiny is required, and whether further remedial actions are undertaken. Negatives, and I think we've discovered those that we want. So we content to move on? Yes. Good. Okay, Angie, it's over to you for People and Culture Plan.
Thank you so much, Colin. And I will ask Paul, if possible, to join in as well, because obviously in front of you today, you have the People and Culture Plan for 23-26. And I've also given hard copies of our rich pictures. So apologies to Hannah and Hugh. When I reference that, if you can look at that particular appendice, that would be brilliant. Just to give you some levels of assurance, obviously we're here today to obviously get formal approval and then move to implementation, but obviously this isn't the first time you've we've seen an iteration of the plan, and we have been discussing in particular the reference to the autonomy, belonging and contribution, and our 3 C's of culture, capacity and capability for probably about 5 or 6 months now. And I suppose I wanted to give you a level of assurance that the work on the plan and the rich picture have been co-created. And I think the session we had earlier from Alison and Andy about co-creation, co-design is pivotal to this. So in terms of developing this work, we have worked with our networks, our trade union colleagues, peers, exec colleagues, networks. Externally, we've had input from the Royal College of Paramedicine, ACE, and other organisations across Wales in the health sector, to try and really make sure that we're listening, learning, but also making sure that this is relevant for the next 3 years. And I suppose perhaps more important than anything at the moment, the topic of culture has probably never been more important. We'll have all seen the numerous reports across all sectors in terms of the importance of culture. And I know when Andy mentioned about our Big Bang event and our recruitment in particular, one of the things that students say to us and new recruits potentially is, what's the culture like in West? What's the work and what's the culture? So for us, it's really important that we can bring that to life for colleagues and that they can see we mean business. And I think the fact that our IMTP gives that real strand for people being at the heart of this, I think the conversations today in terms of avoidable harm and the impact of that are absolutely paramount. So I know the plan is a piece of paper or a virtual document, and it's really about how we bring that to life for colleagues over the next 3 years. And you have in front of you the rich picture, which is just one tool we will be using to try and bring to life for all parts of the organisation that we are committed to really making sure this is the best possible place to work, and that we are totally and utterly committed to making sure that colleagues really can flourish, have the best possible experience, and can really, really progress, develop, and give back to the patients and customers, depending on what part of the business they're in, as much as possible. So if I can just reference the rich picture in particular, and just to say a big thank you to Andy and Leanne particularly, who also helped in terms of the development of this. I just want to start by saying, albeit where we are at the moment is in grey, and it does look really terrible, we also acknowledge there are lots of great things happening at the moment, but we also know there is so much we want to do going forward. And I think we will be using this rich picture to really bring to life that we've heard and we've listened to our colleagues who have told us about some of their enormous challenges. And some of those challenges, particularly in relation to handover delays, the frustration of some of our processes, the perhaps overwhelming lack of time sometimes, and also the fact that we have been in a world of a COVID pandemic, industrial action, where there has been a lot of top down, this is how we have to do things. And that if you look, you see we're moving over a bridge, hopefully, into a new world where actually it is much more collaborative, where there are real opportunities to engage and get involved. And more importantly, linking to the IMTP, that we're going to get the basics right. And that's absolutely where we're starting from with this. And similarly, the pivotal role of our leaders and managers is at the heart of the success of this work. And when I talk about those individuals who play a key part, first line managers in particular are absolutely going to be the key to our success. And so we need to make sure we're investing in them, supporting them, and really making sure that they have the tools, the support, but also the confidence to be able to deliver. And similarly, one of the key things of the plan, and I hope that came through, was the emphasis on professions. We are all professionals and we all belong to a profession. And we are really keen that people understand and celebrate that. And that the investment that Jason talked about earlier and the work we did yesterday with our leadership cadre is just continually demonstrating that we genuinely and demonstrate it on a daily basis that we will invest in you, and that in return, you will do your absolute best work and you will lead your colleagues effectively. Similarly, just in terms of trying to give in the rich picture and a move towards showing what the type of work we will be doing and how we will be doing it, and the importance of digital enablement is key, the value of our volunteers, and particularly by the end of 3 years, where we would like people to be in terms of how they feel, because obviously that's the most important part in terms of, from a cultural perspective, it will be about how our people feel. So hopefully that comes through in terms of they will continue to have pride, but they will also feel that they are heard, that they can make the impact that they want to make, but also they have a more effective work-life balance. Particularly if you think about our emphasis this year about trying to really support colleagues around shift overruns. So I'll stop there and just say to you that, you know, for you as a board particularly, what I'm looking for, and I'm sure Paul will say something in a minute, is that endorsement, but also that absolute buy-in to the fact that this is pivotal to the success of the organisation, that we keep the topic of culture and our people at the top of our agenda, and that we continue to think when we're making decisions, what will this mean for our people as well as our patients, and that we make really good decisions on that basis. So I'll stop there. Paul, would you like to add anything just before we open it up?
Just to say, this has been developing over the last few months, really. It's not something that Angie and her team have gone into a room and developed and written it down. So, and we've had individual conversations as the plan has been progressing. I think we had quite a lot of discussion at the People and Culture Committee. I think it is pivotal. It shows a different way of taking forward the organisation. And as we said earlier, whilst our focus always has to be on our patients, it also has to be on our people, because without one, we don't get the other. And I think we discussed, how do we make sure this plan is actually delivering? So we'll be bringing back some metrics to the August P&C committee, just to check that we understand what we are trying to measure. Some of it, a lot of it will be qualitative, and a lot of it will be how people feel. So how do we get people to tell us how they feel? So they're speaking up safely, work that's being done, etc. The Guardian's work that's being done will help us along that way. But there are some others, you know, the equality of that we've got, etc. So the important thing is the plan is the plan. How do we get buy-in from people on the ground? You know, if I'm doing a shift, how do I recognize this plan? What does it mean to me? How do I contribute to it? So there's an issue about how we get an easy read, some sort of display that, you know, people can buy into, and then how do we monitor the implementation over the next few years, and how do we change the plan, because it's a living document. So at the end of year one, have we done what we expected to do? Have we missed something that we should have done, and should we now need to integrate that into the next year's plan? So it is a living plan. It is something that we want everyone to buy into, and that really means people at the sharp end really seeing this as something that means something to them, not a document that the board has signed off and put on a shelf somewhere.
Thank you very much. So Bethan, and I think shall we go to Bethan first, and then sorry, Kerry, and then.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a great plan, and obviously I was at People and Culture where we had the conversation about the plan. Paul has covered off one of my points in terms of how will we know how successful we are in delivering this. I guess my remaining question is picking up on one of the points Paul said, and that is about how are we going to introduce this to all of our staff? You mentioned, Angie, that the frontline managers, first line managers will be crucial in delivering this, and I completely agree with you. So how are we going to introduce this? How are we going to try to share this and get people's buy-in?
Yeah, happy to answer that. And just on the first point, if I could just say about the metrics, what I will say, having done this in a number of other organisations, those metrics particularly that you really see are things like sick absence go down, job satisfaction goes up, turnover reduces, numbers of applications for posts improve. So there are some really hard metrics that we will see coming through this, and the softer ones then about how people feel. So that was just on the metrics. In terms of how we land this with the organisation, one of the first things I'm going to do is to write directly to all of our first line managers. There is a pack that we will be bringing in with this in terms of some of the like digital tools, but also to run some sessions to talk about the culture conversation. What does it mean for your teams? How can we bring it to life? What's your role in this? And I mentioned, and you'll see, the culture change champions. We've identified probably about 40 people in the organisation, either because they've come to us and said, I want to be part of this, or because we've seen them in other settings where they absolutely embody the culture and the behaviours we want. So they will also play a key role as well. The vision would be that in every team there is an early adopter, a culture champion, but that takes time to get, but that pivotal role of the first line managers is going to be the key point. So we've already thought, right, let's reach out again with exec colleagues, because we're all advocates and we're all champions, to be having those conversations, and that what gets measured mattered, that our first line managers understand that this is important, that it does matter, and that we want to see this reflected in daily conversations. So those would be my response.
Good, thanks. So the hands we've got up so far, we've got Kerry who'll be next, and then Hugh on screen, and then across to Estelle. So, Kerry.
I really like the plan. I like the tone of it. I like that you've brought it alive, in terms of describing what good look like. So what the question for me is, particularly thinking about some of the feedback we heard at the staff roadshows, is can people have the right conversation? Do they feel that they can have the conversation? Have they got somebody that they're willing to have that conversation with? Is there something done about it? So I think a lot of what you talk about in this is really valid and really important, but I think we have identified that there are some issues within the culture that we need to address. So for me, those metrics, and that's hard, I think, because there's a qualitative element to this, and there's a quantitative element. And I know, in terms of those culture champions, that will be important. But I'm just going to give you an example. When I was out last week, I was asking about Westlife and the comms. And, one of the comments I had was, well, I'm not sure that some of our colleagues even look at their iPads. Okay, and that is probably for good reason, isn't it? Because they're busy, they come into work. And so for me, it's how do we really make a difference at the front line? So I suppose as a non-exec director, the answers that I'm looking for, the progress around a lot around that psychological safety, and that we're doing something about that. So I really welcome this. But for me, those metrics are critically important. And my question was, earlier we were talking about metrics for July in terms of the performance report. And I think, well, you're just saying about metrics for August. So are they not being brought together?
Yes, they will be.
So yes. So we're not going to see them in board in July if you're not looking at them in people and culture till August?
I mean, sorry if I missed it. So my view is that there are different levels of metrics. So personally, what I was talking about was the board level ones, and actually Angie was talking about we already have some of those hard metrics, and we will be adding in, as we talked about in F&B, a couple of other ones around equality and diversity, etc.
Yeah.
There will be what we've said about metrics is that they need to run, they need to be different at different levels of the organisation in terms of the level of detail that people get into. So each of the committees, in my view, should have a supplementary set of indicators which they occasionally review in more detail, which in fact people and culture do, which Quest do, and which finance and performance do through a series of deep dives, where there's a metric that's gone, awry. So that would be my view.
Shall I just come back on the other one, because I think it's a really valid point. The point about do people feel safe enough to have conversations? When we do our session as a board development about the culture, one of the things I'm really going to home in on is psychological safety, and what do we mean by it, and how do you really demonstrate it? The Freedom to Speak Up platform, our guardians, they are additional tools we are using to keep reinforcing that we mean this. We're not just saying it. We are going to give people as many avenues as possible to have those conversations. My ideal is they can have those conversations with their managers, that is the ideal. Absolutely, that's where we want to be. But while we get to that, we have to provide other opportunities and other avenues. But that's why I said the emphasis for me on those first line managers, giving them confidence, but also giving the confidence to staff that that's the way to go is going to be key. But alongside that, remember, we will have the freedom to speak up. We're also going to be using an engagement tool to regularly just put out a couple of key questions to see how people are feeling, what's actually happening, are things changing? So again, we'll be able to get some of that rich data very quickly. However, I want to be really realistic. 3 years is not very long. Culture change takes years. Where we want to be in 3 years is to have made progress. And we will see that progress through some of those hard metrics, but some of those, softer ones as well. But, it's to give you the reassurance, Kerry, that there are other avenues that we know we have to use. It would be naive to think we can just say, here we go, this is just going to happen, because we've got to build trust. And I think that's one of the key things.
I think that's really reassuring, Chair. If I could just say, I think what's helpful for us at the board is then how we see that progress. So of course we're not going to want to see those detailed metrics, but it's a story behind this for me that's important. So if we could just make sure that we get to see those. Yeah, thank you.
Good, thanks, Kerry. So Hugh, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Same as everybody else, I like this plan. In support to Bethan and Paul, they make valid points in how do we get the message across to all of our staff. And I'm just thinking out loud in when Rachel presented the IMTP, we discussed breaking it down into bite-sized pieces and what does it mean for the different departments, what does it mean for the staff, and within the process of developing an easy read IMTP for the staff and for the patient. I'm just wondering, Angie, is it worth doing anything on that line with this plan?
Yes, Hugh, absolutely. And we've been doing some work as well around personas, around different types of workforce, people within the workforce and how we can connect with them. So definitely aligning it with the work that Rachel and her team are doing in terms of the IMTP, because what we don't want to do is overload people with lots of different information. And again, I see this as being an ongoing conversation with colleagues across the organisation, and keep referencing back. We'll have roadshow opportunities, of course, but we have lots of other opportunities where we should be reinforcing. And we do know that we meet a lot of our colleagues in lots of different environments. And so the plan is that we are referencing and using the information and reminding people that this is part of this overall plan as often as possible. But absolutely agree, Hugh. The goal is that we want to make this accessible and that people can connect and relate to it as much as possible.
Great, thanks very much. Okay, Hugh. So Estelle, to you.
Thank you, Chair. For me, this is probably the most significant paper on the agenda today, because everything about this organisation is about our people and the culture that we have, from the quality of care that we give to the performance that we deliver ultimately, because this is the ultimate people business. And so from that perspective, there's a couple of things for me. What's the role for us as a board, whether you're a non-exec or an exec member, because actually we set the weather in the organisation. That's the reality. People look at us and they see how we behave, what we facilitate, our approach, and that can be replicated or rejected. TU colleagues have a huge role to play in that with our people. It's about how we engage professionally and personally, because those can be two different things. And we talked yesterday, didn't we, about having and you'll have done it in your insights, your work persona, if you like, and what underpins that in terms of your personal persona, and where do we bring those together? And the other thing is, for me, from a reputational point of view, I don't need to draw out for you the scrutiny that other organisations are under because of the culture, both at board level and within the organisation. And that is something that we need to be absolutely cognizant of, because there is enhanced media and political scrutiny of public sector and emergency service bodies. It's current and won't actually go away. So there is something for me about making sure that we're all signed up here and that we do everything we can to facilitate both what Hugh was talking about, which is getting it out into the organisation in individual interactions, feeling confident enough to challenge where we don't see it. And also, as I say, being really cognizant of our behaviours in this room and elsewhere about setting that weather. Thank you.
Thanks, Angie. Martin.
Yeah, I mean, I welcome the paper, and it's been good to listen to all the comments that have been made. One of the things, though, that I think comes back to something Kerry said, actually, but might be important is it seems to me that the document suggests we know where we want to go. It's whether we know where we are at the minute is of interest to me, so that we know if we've moved from where we are to where we're going. Now, one of the things I've seen in other organizations, and it's worked quite well, is what they call a cultural audit. And you get an independent oversight brought to you by people you bring in to tell you, right, we've done this audit, and this is what the culture of your organization looks like from the perspective of your staff, from the perspective, maybe you can go wider, but this is about staff, but it might be about outsiders. How do outsiders see us culturally? And maybe that's not a bad starting point from which we can measure the progress that we're making against all these actions, because we need to know that they're actually having an impact on ostensibly the culture of the organization. So it's just a suggestion that audit might be helpful at this stage.
Angie, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, and it's a really valid point, Martin. And I did look at it, and I talked to North West Ambulance and a couple of other colleagues who had done it. What I would say is we have the baseline data on a huge range of issues: sick absence, discipline, grievance, complaints, our sexual safety surveys. We do have this huge amount of data that tells us some of the challenges we have. So they are my baseline to begin this process. They are absolutely my baseline. We also have the reputational audit work that Estelle provided as well. So from that point of view, I felt that we had sufficient to allow us to know the starting point. I think if we were in a position where we thought there were no issues, I'd be more concerned, but I think there was a real willingness as an organisation to say, we know there are some challenges. So I think that really did help. And having talked to some of the other ambulance services, whilst they found the audits relevant, what they said is it didn't tell them anything that they didn't already know. However, that doesn't mean that I'm not really keen to use external colleagues. That's why we talked to the Royal College of Paramedicine and other colleagues to sort of keep challenging us, particularly if we become complacent and think we're doing fine. But I would expect through the board, you will see that progress I would expect that's what I'm measuring from our own perspective, is that we will see improvements in all of those things that I've just mentioned to you, and particularly exit interviews. We've got that data. We've got this raft of data that tells us about some of our challenges, and therefore in 3 years' time, where we would be expecting to see the improvement. But it's an absolutely valid point. And just to say, I really did think about it long and hard in terms of thinking, would it be helpful? I was also very conscious we needed to have a new plan quite quickly.
And I'll be coming back to this in board development. So this is not the only session.
No,
We're going to have a lot more discussion about that there. So the purpose today is a great point, Martin, and thank you for that. The purpose today will be in a moment to decide whether we're going to approve this plan or not. That's just a starting point. And I think there'll be a lot more conversations going on. But you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Firstly, I just apologise, offer board apologies for being late back to the second session. I was talking to a member of staff relating to a colleague that we recently lost. Angie, I suppose my comment really, Colin, is just to support Angie's point about the data that we have. We shouldn't forget, of course, that we did have an external culture audit about 18 to 24 months ago, which was the genesis of the new behaviours. So we've also got, in addition to everything that Angie's just said in terms of kind of the metrics, the data we've also got that external lens, which reported at the back end, I think, of the year before last, I think it was the year before last, which we can also use in the mix as a starting point for the point that Martin makes about how do we measure success. But we do have that external lens.
Yeah, just a small one, just to say, from a trading perspective, we're really grateful that this is back on the agenda. Appreciating all the difficult pressures that we've been under, hospital days, everything else takes over. And the fact that, you know, we were renewing it, but it's now got a bit of traction. You know, it's really positive. So thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you. And from my point of view, I'm so pleased to hear the real focus on first line managers, because, you know, you're right, and I've seen this in a number of organisations where, you know, culture is a difficult thing. It is a long journey, as you said, and I think that's one that we have to recognise as well. That like many of the things that we want to do, like inverting the triangle, it's actually a very long journey, and it's one of the issues that we'll talk a bit more about strategies. At the moment, we have a plan that we create every year for the integrated medium-term plan, but it's a one-year plan which looks in year 3, 2 and 3, but not in great deal. It really focuses on the 1 year, doesn't it? And actually, a lot of the things that we want have gestation periods that stretch way beyond that. And we perhaps look at some of those, and this is a good example of that, where we'll see this happening, but we'll see the real benefits in years to come. And the focus on your first line managers is just so critical, because that's where staff interact all the time. And it's also one which is the most difficult to control, because we don't see it, we're so far away from it. So just looking at any other points before we finally seek to approve it. Doesn't look like it. So just looking for colleagues to confirm that we're happy to approve this as a plan on the recommendation of People and Culture Committee. So we duly do that. So thank you very much. Thank you, Angie, for all the work involved. It's very good. Okay, so we're moving on. Last few items then. Trish, there's quite a few now for you.
There is a
There is.
governance trifecta.
Indeed.
Thank you, Chair. So the first one is the standard operating procedure for board visits. It's been circulated to all board members previously. Some will recall that we had a walk-arounds guide in place pre-pandemic. We've used some of that work and taken on the recommendations of Audit Wales in their governance review last year to move that into a standard operating procedure and formalise that a bit more. And whilst we'll continue to hear of lived experiences in committees and at boards, I think it's really key for our board members to be able to go out and meet our people, see and hear from them outside of a formal setting. It's that triangulation of assurance that you don't otherwise get sitting in a meeting, seeing and hearing what's happening on the ground. So the SOP doesn't seek to establish a program of visits, but it gives members a bit of a menu of things to choose from. That's still the standard visits to stations and ride-outs, but also the opportunity to engage with staff at long service awards and CEO roadshows, but also a little bit of a hybrid model in there as well to help meet people. There's some guidance in the SOP as well for both board members and for staff members who are going to be receiving visits on the sort of questions to ask. There's a feedback form as well, which was a recommendation from Audit Wales, and we'll make sure that that's on an MS Forms for board members to be able to use. And then lastly, we've incorporated a dashboard so that we can actually see visibly really where people have been to, so that we make sure that we have a good spread pan Wales, and that will be populated in real time with all board members being able to access that. Will give us another another element of board effectiveness when we do our annual review. There's illustrative data on this one at the moment, but it is now live. We're just populating it from the 1st of January, and shortly after this board meeting, we'll give board members a link so that you can see that. And lastly, once this is approved, hopefully today, we will make sure that it goes on Siren and is communicated to staff as well. And I've already spoken to a couple of staff members. I think it's one of your visits, Kerry, that's coming up, and we've sent them the SOP so that they've got the detail and they know what to expect.
Great. Any questions on that? Yes, Estelle.
Only a couple of observations, thank you, Chair. One is, apart from not being terribly fond of the SOP concept in terms of standard operating procedure, I'd much rather call it guidance. The important thing for me is twofold, really. One is that we don't use it as a script. There's a whole list of questions there. We're not going in to grill people, so we just need to be mindful of that. I know we all know that, but when this goes out to staff, you can imagine they're going to go, oh my God, you know, there's a list, have a list of questions fired at me. So as long as people understand that, it's really important. And the other thing that's really important is the richest conversations we will have and the best sort of temperature check, if you like, to triangulate what we hear in these sorts of fora, is where there's a relationship built on trust. And that trust comes from having those genuine conversations, being genuinely interested in what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and all this. I'm looking at you, Kerry, because I know you've been doing a lot of this recently. So those were just my observations, so that when we put it out into the organisation, it doesn't look like, stand by your beds, you're being inspected, etc., etc. And, these are you've got to have a team meeting to work out what you're going to say in response, because that to me would be completely artificial and wouldn't give that richness and that depth and that actually authentic feedback that you will need, particularly as non-execs, to triangulate what we're telling you as executives for you to authenticate that.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with that. I think that's right. Absolutely right. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. You sort of touched on my first question, Trish, when you said this is going to be shared with the staff team that Kerry's arranged to go and see. My question was going to be, has this been shared with staff? Or is it about two?
It's about two. So once it's approved, then we'll work with Estelle and her team to get the right comms via Siren as well. And when we do know that board members are going out to see somebody, we'll make sure that we're sending that to them directly and giving them some information. So two-pronged.
Great. I agree with the points that Estelle was making as well. And my final is just a comment. I note that in Annex C it says there can be impromptu visits, and certainly for me, that's helpful for me. Planning a visit is sometimes more difficult. So I'm pleased to see that if you're passing an area, you can just call in. I accept there may not be people there, but it's a chance you can take. So I welcome seeing that in there. Thank you.
Good. Any other comments? Oh, Hannah's got a hand up. I spotted it this time.
Thanks, Chair. Just very quickly to second what Bethan said, really, it's really helpful to be able to just sort of pop over, and I wonder if that might in some ways mitigate some of the risk that Estelle mentioned, in that it's not an inspection, it's not that, it might even be that, I'm passing and not very far from an ED and go and have a chat to people on the ramp, but I think knowing that it can be also just quite informal, just to get a bit of a sense of what's going on. So yeah, I would support Bethan's point there.
Good, thanks, Hannah. For me, it's a balance, isn't it, that we really want to encourage the visits. And Kerry's doing a fantastic job getting out and about. I know, Hannah, you've got ambitions to do so, and Bethan, you're always doing it, and others, and Martin. So we want to encourage that. And having some record of it is good for governance purposes as well. It demonstrates that we're doing that. It demonstrates that the notes are not just turning up for meetings, but they're actually getting out and about. And the more we do it, the better. So I think the guidance is helpful. But I think your words of warning, Stella, are well spoken, well said. So, with that having been said, doesn't appear to be any other hands up. So, are we content to approve this as a SOP and put it into operation? Good. Thank you. Right, on to the secondary items then, Trish.
Thank you. So this is the annual board and committee effectiveness reviews. I'm not going to go individually through all 7 annual reports and terms of reference for the committees. They've been reviewed by all of the committees and were reviewed as a pack by audit committee. But I think it's just helpful to give a bit of an overview as to how we come to this spot every year, really, which is, we look at external and internal sources of assurance, and we know that two important ones are that we've remained at routine arrangements under the joint escalation and intervention arrangements. We've also had our Audit Wales structured assessment, which has said that the trust is well led, board and committees are effective, meetings are of an appropriate length, etc., etc. We have spoken at length in a few forums about the issue raised in the Audit Wales report around challenge and scrutiny, and I think that we've given that quite a good airing and looked at ways that we can address that, both within the structures of the committees and outside of that. We've also done a couple of self-assessments. One was against the governance code, which we have to confirm in our annual report that we've reviewed on a comply or explain basis. So we did that, and we also did a self-assessment against the health and care standards for governance, leadership and accountability. So that went to the audit committee. Nothing to escalate to this board. There was a couple of areas within the health and care standards which we know are now as was, which we know that we've got some work to do around them, but none that were not met. The board has met in public 7 times this year. Each meeting has been live streamed and then communicated via YouTube. They've all been quorate meetings on each occasion. The committees are also committees in public with chairs reporting to the board on a full breadth of what happened at those meetings on the AAA reports. Committee meetings are advertised on the website, so anybody wanting to join can ask for a link and we will give them a Teams link to join the meeting. In addition to that, all of the papers are on the board website as well, well in advance of the meeting. All of the scheduled meetings took place last year and all of them were quorate as well. We've had a sizable board development program in place last year with 10 sessions in all covering 20 topics. But a big part of the board's effectiveness is how effective our 7 committees are. And I'm sure that everybody around this table has had experience of the extensive reviews that we've done in Q3 and Q4 in all of the committees. Each of them have reviewed their terms of reference, not just in committee, but on a one-on-one with the chair and the executive lead. So it's been quite an extensive process. We also had a survey with all of the members and the attendees of the committees as well, looking at a baseline. All of the committees this year for the first time had the same questionnaire, so that we now have that baseline going forward into next year. They've reviewed, we had a quite extensive review of terms of reference last year, so there weren't many changes this year. You'll see them, I've pulled them out in paragraph 25, but I've also put in Annex 1 a spread of what the committees look at, and so that is the full delegation of the board. So we did that so that we can make sure that we're not duplicating our work across. As far as membership is concerned, there has been some changes to membership. They're all marked up in the terms of reference, and you've also got the membership matrix there at Annex 9. Each committee's now got a full cycle of business as well, which we're using to set the agenda. So that's on the committees. We then did a very short questionnaire for board members on what the board was doing well, what we could do better, what the development needs were, and you'll see we've summarized that in the paper there as well at paragraph 28. So taking into account that and all of the responses from the committees, we've got a decent list of changes to operating arrangements at paragraph 29, many of which we've already put in place and others that we're planning for later this year. And that plus that ongoing monitoring of our cycle of business and a period of reflection enables us also to have an ongoing view of effectiveness of these committees. And I guess lastly, Chair, I'd just like to sort of thank all of the board chairs and executive leads and all the members for their patience on what was a very time-consuming process. But I hope that the board will see that both the mechanics and the dynamics of the board and their committees have really matured over this last year and will continue to do so this year.
Thank you. Lots of documentation, lots of work here relating to all 7 of our committees. It's not my intention to go through each and every one. I think I need to do that. We've seen them all here. We'll take them as a bundle. We basically got to note that the effectiveness reviews have been done for all of those committees, and then we've also got to approve the terms of references. So we'll do them as a bundle. But before I ask for the general approval, are there any questions or are there any issues, any specific matters anybody wants to raise relating to a particular committee? No, good. So in that case, can I just assume that we have all noted the effectiveness reviews, and can I ask that we're all content to approve the changes to the terms of reference for all of the committees in one go? Good, all done. Excellent. I think that's all we're required to do then, Trish. So we will stay with you for the final part.
Thank you. So there's been no, this is on the standing orders, review of standing orders. There's been no formal review by Welsh Government of the model standing orders as yet. It's anticipated that it will happen shortly. But in order to make sure that we have reviewed them, we've made some minor changes to those elements that is within our gift change, and that is really just some very non-material changes to titles really in the table of delegation, and the addition of the terms of reference, the revised terms of reference in Schedule 3, and the WASP terms of reference. So they're the fairly non-material changes, but important that we bring those through. I think what is important for the board to note is that the standing orders does say that our AGM has to be held by the 28th of July every year. Welsh Government have written to say that that's now been extended to no later than the 28th of September because of the audit timeline. So if we could formally approve that amendment to the standing orders today.
Okay. So again, very straightforward piece of administration, really. Minor changes. Any questions, any comments anybody wishes to make? I think it's pretty very straightforward. So I'm just looking, I'll be happy to approve the amendment. Well, there's two amendments, so as one bundle, I'll be happy to approve both the amendments suggested. Yes, we are. Good. Okay. Lovely. Thank you, Trish. So we now come back to the AAA reports, come back in the sense that we touched on them when we talked about mitigating harm. So let's go around our chairs of the committees and hear from them in terms of the AAA reports, if there's anything they particularly want to raise at board level, given that we've already talked about the two highest risks already. And Kerry, you're first on the list.
Thank you. So no alerts from the charity committee, but we've had two really good discussions, I think, in April on the strategic review, and it feels like it's progressing well. And we had another conversation last week. So, you know, I think I'm really optimistic that we're on the right trajectory and we'll be able to develop the charity. And we had Bron and Angela join the meeting as part of our lived experience, increasing how we're hearing from the impact of the charity. So, and it was really interesting actually about bringing together hillside walking, mental health support, actually professional mental health support, and mindfulness. And also we talked a little bit around the inclusiveness of that and the accessibility of it. So yeah, a really good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to take note? Martin, next order.
No, I'm not. I assume everybody's read it, so I've got nothing to add to the report that's in front of you, Chairman.
And no particular alerts, no questions. No. So then to Hannah, academic partnership. Anything you wanted to bring out from your AAA report, Hannah?
Thanks, Chair. Just one item, as you can see, to alert, which is just to let you know that we've now got terms of reference in place, and so our task and finish group has been tasked with thinking about how we go about essentially recruiting a non-exec director who will also meet the requirements for the final step to achieving university trust status. We recognise that there are various issues to be considered, various potential complications and risks. So this group is going to work between now and October, so it's obviously time limited, to come and present back to us some suggestions around how we go about that, mitigations to risks, so that, and then it will of course be something that's discussed with the whole board. But just wanted to let you know that as we hold the sort of brief for the university trust status scrutiny, we have got that in place in terms of doing some of the background work before we then discuss more broadly. I will also say at this point, I don't know if Estelle wanted to make any comment as well, but that was all I was going to draw out. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. Estelle, did you want to add anything?
Not specifically, Chair, other than to say just yesterday, Trish and I have now got time in the diary with colleagues in Welsh Government to explore that non-exec issue, amongst others.
Good. Okay. Any other questions to Hannah? No? Okay. Good. Paul, People and Culture.
Well, we've talked about so I will talk about that. Just a couple of issues around the culture, I suppose, and diversity. We look back at Fatula's story that we heard in November and looked back and reflected on that in May. And whilst things haven't changed very quickly, there were a number of things that came out of that conversation, which you both were at that meeting. Things like quiet spaces, prayer rooms, looking at rosters that link with individuals' religious beliefs, not just the Christian calendar, for example, and recognizing that we have got some rooms that we probably weren't aware of, one being here, for example. So it was really useful to look back at, well, what can we do and what have we done and what more can we do? So that was interesting. And then later on, we'd asked for a deep dive on ethnicity and diversity in terms of our recruitment practices. And we got a lot of assurance that actually we do cast the net quite wide, and we do have a lot of applicants from Black and ethnic minority groups. But what happens is that as they go through the process, they seem to drop off in terms of success. So we were looking at, well, why does that happen? And particularly at the shortlisting phase, we know that a lot of people put in an application, withdraw, they may apply to different centres, etc. But we wanted a bit more work done on that aspect. Well, what happens at the shortlisting phase? Is it because they don't have the qualifications? Is it that they've changed their minds, etc.? But it was reassuring to see that actually our number of applicants are really good. We talked about exit interviews. We were changing that description to moving on interviews because it sounds, cut and dried, black and white, exit interviews gone. This was about moving on, so that's going to be piloted again. And then we had some presentations on the engagement framework that Estelle is leading and the seasonal flu plan from last year that Andy led on, and looking at how we take that forward into the future years. We also had some progress reports on our anti-racist plans and the health and safety performance and the audit tracker. So it was a very busy agenda, but there was a lot of positive coming out. Two issues we've already discussed. One is the People and Culture Plan, which the board has now approved, and the second one was the change in the name of the Workforce Directorate to People and Culture.
Good. Thank you very much, Paul. Any comments or questions to Paul? And no, so then finally, Bethan, to you with two hats on this afternoon, because you're going to be speaking up for Jogger, who's not here.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So moving to Quest next. We did have Audit Wales at the meeting, just for Trust Board to know that. And I did have a feedback meeting with Audit Wales a few days afterwards as part of their structured assessment, which was really helpful. We've covered the points under the alert section earlier because they're all relating to patient harm and risk. In the advice section, I mentioned earlier a story that we had from one of our CFRs, and out of that patient story in this meeting, it was agreed that Quest would ask P&C to, at a future meeting, to look into the changing face of the role of our volunteers. And I know...
Can I just say,
yes.
I've made that request and Leah's responded.
And I could see that. You took the words out of my mouth, Paul, which is fine. So that was really positive, really, because the environment, I think, is very different now, isn't it? Or the pressures are continuing, I suppose, which has had some impact. With regards to the quality strategy, we know we've had some challenges in terms of the implementation of that because of the system pressures and how they've affected WAST. However, the committee were very much assured and pleased to see progress in the latter part of 2022-2023. We approved our clinical audit plan, which is great. Within the operational update, we talked about the deep dive that's being done on red calls, and members did ask whether this could take into account the impact in more rural areas. Officers are looking at that, whilst recognising there's difficulties within that because of the much smaller numbers, etc. But that work is ongoing. In the assure section, we discussed the implementation of the duty of quality and duty of candour, and we recognised and were assured by the fact that significant progress has been made by WAST. And importantly, there's been some exemplar content developed within WAST that is now being adopted at NHS Wales across the country. As an example, the quality impact assessments developed here are now being adopted across NHS Wales Executive. So we congratulate the staff for their work on those really. The quality governance review undertaken last year by Audit Wales did raise a query around the backlog of mortality review. So we received that paper at the committee meeting, and the committee were assured that this work is having focus now and it's an evolving piece of work. All of the other points, I think, have been covered earlier.
Okay, thanks, Bethan. Did you want to just cover joggers? I know there were no alerts on the F&P.
No alerts. We had, under the advice section, we had a really interesting conversation around the revised KPIs, didn't we, for 23-24? So I think that was quite a robust discussion. And I think that was, well, no, I know that was something picked up by the auditor as well, in terms of welcoming the conversation we had at the committee. And I know that there's going to be a future board development discussion around that. The cycle of business was approved. We mentioned earlier, and within the operational update, that the RCN have notified of another industrial action day next month. Under the assure section, the financial performance at month 12, really positive, very positive reception for the report. There's a small revenue surplus, as we can see. The capital expenditure was fully spent. We achieved, and this is quite significant, the gross savings of 4.392 million. So well done to all teams involved in achieving that, notably your directorate, where the majority of the savings are, and also Chris's team in collating all of that. And also the public sector payment policy was on track. The other point that we discussed was the financial performance at month 1, which we've touched on in this meeting. So I won't say any more on that, other than to say, as part of this, we looked at a deep dive into risk 139, which is the failure to deliver on statutory financial duties. And we did discuss and agree that we felt that current risk score in 15 was appropriate for this time at the moment. Finally, the decarbonisation and sustainability update. We did have a progress report, and we're pleased to note that as a result of our self-evaluation, we've moved from red to amber rating, which was welcomed. What I would like to say, just a note of caution really, we continue to raise concerns around resources to deliver on this significant, this huge agenda. We recognise the capacity and constraints arising from this in terms of implementation. We've covered the point on risks, I think, earlier in the meeting. So at that point, I think I'll stop and open up to questions.
Good, thanks, Bethan. Any comments or questions on the F&P AAAs? No, good. Chris, I just wonder whether did you mention you wanted to say another word or two on capital items before we kind of close?
In the closed session.
Okay, on the closed session. Good. Okay, that then takes us to the consent items, which I've not been notified anybody wanted to speak to on any of these. So those are the minutes of committee meetings that took place earlier in the year. They're all there in the board pack that everybody had a chance to read. So I think we just take that matter as dealt with. I don't have any other business. I don't know if anybody else does. I've not been notified of anything. There is one matter I would like to just mention, though, if I may, and that's the situation around our vice chair and Kevin, who's now starting to go red. Because we are still on the assumption that the Welsh Government has a cunning plan about a replacement for a vice chair. It is just an assumption that they have a cunning plan. They may or they may not have a cunning plan, but we will find out in the fullness of time. We genuinely don't know at this stage. But on the assumption that they have a cunning plan, this will be, Kevin, your last formal board meeting, not the last time we see you, because you'll be here to a board development in June. So we shall work on a plan to embarrass you seriously at that meeting. You may speak, yes, absolutely, please do.
I didn't get a chance to speak at the December time because I was on the screen. I wasn't in person, which is a real shame. So I'm working on the assumption that the on-call will end at the end of next month. And this isn't being recorded now, is it?
Yes.
Oh, it's okay. Right. So all I will say then is it's been an absolute pleasure to see this organisation evolve in the way it has, with the ambition that it has, and the individuals that make it happen around this table, but also the people I know widely across the organisation. I think the absolute leadership and response, particularly during the pandemic, was humbling. To play a very small part in that was, you know, we were all part of history, and I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. So it's been an absolute pleasure, and probably, you know, in the real twilight of my 45 years of nursing career to date, it's been a highlight. So I thank you very much. I wish you all the best against the challenges that will be undoubtedly yours to face. But I thank you. So it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. We'll give you the chance to speak more later on. We've got a closed session coming up, and we've got board development session later in next month. So we're definitely not saying goodbye today, but I didn't want today to go by as our formal in public meeting without recognising your service over many, many years. I've only known you a very short time, but I've come to respect your judgment and your contributions over the few months I've been here. And I know that colleagues around who have known you for all the years that you've been here will reflect on that. So a heartfelt thank you from us to you. Okay, all that remains then is to inform the board of the next meeting, which is in person again in July, and as normal, to resolve that we exclude members of the public and the press for our closed session, which will take place after lunch. So on that point, we'll call this meeting to an end, and we'll reconvene for the closed session. It says 1:45. We could make it 1:30 if people want, because we are running a little bit out of time. So shall we say that 1:30 reconvene after lunch? Thank you.